Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mana Dorks Podcast. I am your host, Nick, and here is my co-host, Kevin.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello, hello. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure thing. I'm Kevin, also known as the Rogue Deck Builder, or the Rogue Market, or Gone Rogue Games, or the other plethora of other projects I've started and never quite finished.
Oh, yeah. And I'm Nick, Tasty Snackies. Sometimes I'll upload a video once or twice a year, but primarily I've been working more in game design lately for the past couple of years. And I've been really enjoying Magic for, I want to say Kamigawa Neon Destiny is when I decided that I was going to get back into the game. I took a break right around the end of 2019, or it was actually right around War of the Spark is when my interests initially started to die down a bit. And then, ironically, not only Kamigawa, but also Universes Beyond helped pull me back into the game. But that is a subject that we can save for later. For right now, at least what I want to talk about in this episode is I want to talk about Foundations first off. I know you got some things that you want to say about Foundations, and I'm fairly positive, if not at the least ambivalent towards the set. And then we're going to be talking about our favorite cards from the set. And then we're also going to be talking about the return of manufacturer suggested retail price, otherwise known as MSRP. And so we'll get started off with Foundations here. And the first question I wanted to ask, because this is something that I've been thinking about for a few weeks now, and it's that obviously Magic has had a core set problem for the last, 15 years or so, particularly with, I want to say, M10, M11, M12. It was around that kind of period where it kind of brought back a little bit, and then it tapered off with M15, and then Magic Origins came back, obviously, for core set 20 and 21. But now, with this new reboot of a core set, is kind of like almost split, or I'd say combined with like a living card game-esque, where it's just all the stuff here for 5 years or so. Completely new idea in Magic. So what do you think about it?
So, obviously, I'm not the target demographic for this. I get what they're trying to do. One of the complaints that has been around for Standard for a long time that I've never agreed with is that it rotates too quickly, or that people don't have enough time to really build around the cards of their collection. What I like about Standard is it does rotate and it stays fresh. And if there's a problematic card, it'll just rotate out. We don't have to deal with it forever. So that's my main problem with Foundations. First of all, I think it's a hot mess. I don't think they have any clue what they're doing with this set. It seems like there was a bunch of pet cards that the designers just threw back in. And there are a lot of problematic cards, in my opinion, that we wanted to rotate that are now going to be stuck around for 5 years or have the potential of becoming problematic. And lastly, it's quite boring, too, with a lot of the reprints. So some of these cards were just like lackluster when they were in Standard and didn't quite work out. And actually what I've been noticing the most about Foundations, especially in the Mythic slot, is Magic has changed so much in Standard that these are so god-awful unplayable. Like Magic, the issue with Standard when they've pushed these last few sets, and unless they do this massive power reset where we go back to a slower paced Magic where 5 and 6 drops are viable, then a lot of these cards are just so has-beens that have zero chance of ever seeing any sort of significant play in Standard. And the saddest thing about them is some of them are really fun when they were in their standards, and I don't know what Wizards was thinking, like, okay, well, this is going to be an opportunity for them to shine again in Standard, but they've just lost the plot. I think they don't even understand their own game and exactly how it's morphed. And again, these it's like taking Jordan out of retirement and like, you're back on the, but he's an old man now, and these cards just don't work. So that's kind of my issue with it. As far as that, especially the Mythic slot. But yeah,
when you're talking about a lot of these, we'll call them nostalgic cards, when you were asking earlier who you think the target audience is for, I was thinking actively in response to that, maybe, and this is coming from my own personal perspective here, and it's that I think it is the nostalgia factor. I think it is the aspect of bringing in the players that were playing maybe in the, we'll say, Alara to Theros kind of era, who maybe have tapered off in the last couple years or so. This is kind of like an opportunity to say, like, hey, is Massacre Worm in the set? Is that
Yeah,
the card I'm thinking
Mask
of?
Worm is. Wait, that's my other
Okay.
point too. There's a lot of repetition
Mm-hmm.
in Foundations. So like Fumigate and Day of Judgment, I would notice a lot of those. Like these
Yeah.
cards that are just like when they created Foundations, my whole the premise that I was kind of sold on was that we need a core set, and we're sick of redoing core sets every year because it gets way too redundant. But there needs to be a place where we can park cards that we don't want to. We want them in standard, and we want this foundation because these cards need to exist for standard environments to stay healthy. And there's a lot of them in here that I can go over and say, okay, this is definitely in here because they, like Soul, what is it, Soul Lantern, the one that like anything that deals with exiling cards from
Oh,
graveyards,
the
or
Soul
a
Guide
lot of the
Lantern.
enchantments in this too. It's like, okay, let's make sure artifacts and enchantments are viable strategies, and we don't have to like try to make a set. Each new set come out have a few equipments, a few auras, a few of these, just so they can maintain that these archetypes can actually be viable. So if we just park them in a core set that doesn't, we don't have to do this every few years, or we only have to do this every few years, or in this case 5 years, then we can focus more on the mechanics of the upcoming set and the flavor of the upcoming sets, and don't have to waste those slots. But somewhere along the line, then it just turned into, I've had it described as a real Masters 30, or a love letter to like the nostalgia of these cards, where it's all these fun cards that we've played with or brewed around with in years to past. But again, that's my biggest issue. It's like we've already done all of this stuff. Like none of these cards are like
Yeah.
necessary for the foundation. They're just has-beens.
Do you think?
So
Well, I mean, one aspect is thinking maybe it's a form of chaff to help pad out the numbers, so that way you don't have this mega set that's supposed to last half a decade, have all the value extracted out of it immediately by having a bunch of random, at this point, very bulk rares, even if printed in standard, again, like Fumigate, like you said, like, or Day of Judgment. That card was what, $5 for the longest time, and now that it's going to be in standard, it may hold that price. It probably drop down significantly. But I
well,
mean, the
Day of
sheer
Judgment's been
number of,
outclassed.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
um,
This set is so weird because it's like it's going back to these cards that have been, I mean, they've been pushed out power level uh, years ago at this point.
mm-hmm.
And so it's just, but Day of Judgment is the perfect card that I think should be in this foundation set because you want a board wipe. You want a 4-mana sweeper to exist in standard. It helps keep things in check. And that way they don't have to keep creating them in every set that comes out. They don't have to like, and
And
we
I
have
mean,
too many already in standard.
for the average Timmy that comes into your store and says, "Hey, I'm new to Magic. Where's a good starting point?" And then you point them towards Foundations. They open up the pack. They see Land War Elves and they see Day of Judgment. That right there is like a snapshot to them, telling you this is what to expect. Whether or not it's going to be relevant in the format is another thing, but at the very least, it feels like that's kind of its sole purpose initially, is to tell newer players or returning players, it's just like, hey, you know what? This is where the starting blocks begin, rather than having to build within certain archetypes within certain sets and be like, do you want to play excuse me, the investigate deck from
Yeah.
Murderers at Karlov Manor or something like that. It's just like here's your basic Lego set, and then everything else just can augment on top of that.
And they did that okay. I mean, you can obviously see the archetypes are in here. I mean, in white, they have a life gain / cats. Black, they have like zombies / sacrifice. But I mean, a lot of them were so boring. They really pushed burn with basically a lava spike
Oh
functional
yeah, they
reprint
did.
and Boros charm, and then
Slag Storm.
brought back get you lava mancer. Like everything is it's that was my problem with like what was this set? Ikoria, the original Ikoria. It's like they printed
Mm-hmm.
the perfect amount of cards that it built a standard deck out of the card.
Oh,
Like there
like
was no
that
brewing. It's
cycling
like,
deck.
here's your 60 cards for this
Yeah.
this deck. And it got really bad, even like Battle for Zendikar. It's like just a perfect amount of rogues to do everything you need for this thing. And so it was like very difficult to customize. And one of the things that I really like about standard at the moment is standard is pretty wide open with a lot of there's I hate and love this about standard because I typically like standards with a lower power level, but at the same time there are slots in every deck that you can justify. Oh, I could run this card instead of this card, and it's leading to a not solved metagame because people every week can innovate and be like, okay, well against this specific deck, like even if you look at the worlds, the way they built the black blue demons was so customized. Like, okay, this version of it's good versus this strategy, and this version of it's good, and so there's this kind of self-policing, self-rotating meta based upon what deck becomes the top deck, and those are always very very fun standards. And I don't know that this kind of the problem I'm having too with this set is it's adding so much to the card pool that standard now feels like Pioneer, and especially when it's not gonna. This set particularly is not gonna rotate. It's setting this base of things that are gonna be. I mean, so if cats are gonna be viable, which it actually does look like they've printed enough cards to make this like Selesnya tokens or go wide strategy. I mean, this is gonna be now for 5 years. We're gonna have these very, in my opinion, that can become tired decks that are just gonna these archetypes that are gonna stick around and not rotate. And I don't know. That's one of the major problems I'm seeing with Foundations.
Now, would you also now let's say for example like this cat deck, right? Let's say that this just hypothetically takes off and it becomes like a really solid tier 2, entry style deck. With other cards in the set like obviously like Slagstorm mentioned earlier also being in Foundations with it, do you think that there's enough policing within the actual design of the set to help keep itself balanced so that way Foundations isn't just the archetype for standard?
Yeah, well, I'm not. It's going to be certain cards I'm more specifically kind of peeved at because I don't think they add much to a standard. Like if they wanted this to be Pioneer, then maybe they should have made Foundations just more of like a, hey, here's this baseline you can get into Pioneer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not explaining myself like I'm just looking over like things like Yada Fontophobe for this like angel like strategy, or Holana and Elena
which
partners.
was a card that just rotated out, right?
Yeah, or like Harbinger of the Tides. Like we've already played these archetypes.
Desecration Demon.
We've so I mean that's the whole thing with Pioneer. It's like, oh, we can go back to the oldies. We can go back to some of our greatest hits, some of the cards that we like to play in standard. Now we can play them in Pioneer. And so Foundations like feels like that. They're like, oh, remember when this card was really cool to play? Remember the red green aggro deck with Helena that was like your 4-drop that finished the game? Okay, wait, let's print that card again in standard. It's like, oh my, we've already played it.
I do like the idea that I can play Spectral Sailor, turn 2, Brineborn Cutthroat.
We've already played that deck. That deck was a thing.
And then later on, we can also play that new 4-drop Flash Sphinx, the 3/3.
Yeah, well, again, that goes back to my...
it augments it.
My, paint by numbers type decks that they've created with... like they've showed you exactly, like, these are cards that you're going to play in this particular order. But like that's my argument is get you fire... We really want that back in standard with Monastery Mentor or Monastery Swissbear still in the format. With
we're not going to have Fires of Invention in the format. Hopefully not.
Well, yeah. I mean, it didn't seem like they outright printed any of the like broken cards that warp standard, but at the same like mentioned Slagstorm. Now there's going to be the 3 damage sweep. I mean, there already is one in standard at the moment, but now here's Slagstorm's going to be in the format. And maybe this will be good to police it for 5 years. It's just, for me personally, what I like about standard the most is not well, of course, new cards coming in, but a lot of cards actually rotate out. Like it's gonna be so nice when Shieldred rotates out.
Yeah.
Because I think it brings the meta wide open that now we have a bunch of 4-drops that are actually playable now because all roads
Right.
led to playing Shieldred. And like even looking at a lot of these cards, it's like pieces of decks that we've played before, and they're definitely going to see play. And maybe they won't be tier 1 strategy, but again, that's my best kind of analogy here is this, it just feels like Pioneer. It's that's the whole point of Pioneer, is to be playing cards from yesteryears of Standard again for that.
Well, yeah, to a certain extent, I do agree that it does make it feel at least more eternal. And what just came to mind, and I was going to ask you about, because I'm thinking you probably played back then, but Extended used to be a thing. I wasn't around for it. I came into competitive Magic about a year after Extended got completely phased out. And
Well,
so with this, from what I recollect from Extended, was that it was about 4.5 to 5 years worth of cards. And so do you think like maybe that's what they're trying to do with Standard is at least with Foundations and just Standard in general, increasing from a 2-year rotation to a 3-year rotation, that they are trying to eternalize the format more so that way it's not as aggressive and it doesn't price people out as quickly.
I wish they would have stuck with it. And this is something I've always told game designers too, is never listen to your players. I mean, of course, listen to your players, but never. There's some things that you just need to stick your fingers in your ear and be like, okay, they don't know what's good for the game, because humans are so fickle. A lot of times they want easy modes. They think they know what they want, but then when it comes into like let's take a game like World of Warcraft, for example. That's the one I always keep going back on. Is that everyone complained what a time suck World of Warcraft was, that it was so tedious to do all the dailies. It was so like all these things they had, and there were some legitimate complaints, and there were some things that could be smoothed over. But then Blizzard really started to listen to them and like, okay, well, we're just going to start giving people, the second best armor, the gear the season after it rotates for basically nothing. Like the at that time is arena armor. So you get so you didn't have to you could just actually sit out a month and then just come back in and you could just immediately basically catch back up. And it was like decisions. It's decisions like that, and they made everything so easy. Like a lot of the dailies and stuff weren't as tedious, but then they became insanely monotonous because they're so easy to do. And then the game died. The game, that's what killed, because it took away all of the kind of achievement. I mean, that's why people play these MMORPGs, is this feeling of progression and achievement. And with Magic, when they rotated they want to do 1.5 years. So I remember this was Oath of the Gatewatch, or it was a little bit after. I remember they made the announcement like, we want Standard to rotate quicker, and everyone lost their minds because they thought it was just a money grab by Magic. But at the time, what was the problem is they realized that they didn't want to do so many bannings, and it was very, very hard to design interesting cards that would see play without them. And added at the time would be good enough for Modern. That was one of their key things. They wanted cards to be able to enter into Modern because they needed to keep Modern fresh. And this is how Modern actually did get new cards, is it had to, at that time, go through Standard to be able to be good enough for Modern. And so they had this little fine line.
That's what it used to be. Everyone would just look for the one eternal card in each set or whatever.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that would sell packs a lot of times too, because Modern was so hot, because people wanted some sort of eternal playability out of it. And so they're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, then things need to rotate quicker, because we don't want to be stuck with a oppressive card for so long. And we also don't want to ban things, because banning is the worst. And they want to avoid bannings at all costs, because, that makes everyone ticked off, is when they build a deck and it gets banned. So they did this, okay, we're going to do this 1.5. So every 18 months Standard rotates, and everyone cried that, oh, my decks don't stick around. So I mean, maybe I'm out of touch with the average player, and the reception by most people for this new 3-year rotation has been really good. And I'm like, geez, I am so sick of some of these cards that I wish were, but at the same time it's also kind of nice because because there were some cards that are like Brothers War Dominaria, and especially now marching machines that are starting to be viable because
Yeah.
the card pool is deeper, so they can actually fit in certain slots. Like I said, now you can like justify. You have enough of what's good about standard now is you have all of the essential tools to combat other decks. So like if people know Legacy, there oftentimes people have pet cards for finishers in Legacy
Yeah.
that aren't even that great. Like, but
But they just
so if
like
you look
win
at a
them.
Blood Moon deck, the deck isn't winning because of the win con; it's winning because of the lock. So you can
Yeah.
basically run whatever win con you want, and then the lock is there, and that's how standard kind of feels. Like, okay, we've got our little pieces to uh, get the state, the gate, the basically the board state to where we want it, and then you can run whatever synergy or finisher to that
That's how I
you
am
deem
with
fit.
my standard deck, yeah. Because my standard deck is just average green black mid range, but my choice of win con, only because I opened it, is Maha. It's Feathers Knight. I just like it. It's spicy.
Yeah,
It's not
well,
great. It's not like fantastic, but it's cool. I like it.
that's a good example though, because I think Golgari and Demir are the perfect examples of like, here's your shell that you're. This is this is what you're doing with basically Golgari and Demir right now are good at shutting down a lot of the cheese decks because they have the appropriate ability to fight control and aggro. And
Hmm.
then you can basically so that's all going to stay consistent within those shells, and then you can basically okay, do I want to go demons, do I want to go especially Golgari, you can go so many, I want to go planeswalkers with
Oh yeah.
innkeeper finish, so there's a lot of routes you can go and a lot of
Um,
cards you can justify going in there. So but anyway, I'm digressing here with where I'm going with my thought. So I don't know, it's rough with going back to what I was saying, that sometimes they shouldn't listen to their uh players. Is I think if they would have given it
players know how
a
to
little more
identify
time.
problems, but they don't know how to
The,
figure out the solution.
yeah, and sometimes they want the easy solution,
Yeah.
and sometimes easy isn't best. And so with the faster rotation, I really wish that they would have given it more time and let it kind of sink in that maybe a fast standard with a lower card pool is more enjoyable if they could have then balanced sets better. And I mean that's what I'm seeing right now. Like one of the things that I have to give credit where credit's due is I think that Wizards has done a very good job with standard sets since like Kamigawa. They haven't really had. I know people didn't like New Capenna and they didn't like Murders of Karlov Manor, but those sets are super deep, and their
They're
limited
still
environments were great.
interesting.
Yeah, and there, yeah, a lot of interesting mechanics. One of my favorite things that the design team has been doing is they've been instead of printing boring cards like Mind Rot or Naturalize, they've been throwing like an added effect on it that
Actually, like giving more chances to showcase set-based mechanics.
yeah,
Because one
like
of the
put Manifest
problems
Dread on
with
it.
yeah, exactly. Because one of the things with Magic is we're not doing blocks anymore, so you can't showcase heroic two sets in a row. If you're gonna have heroic in the set, yeah, staple it on your mind rot effect or
Yeah,
whatever, just that kind of stuff of like investigate or reconfigure from Kamigawa. Like they really push that hard in ninjutsu as well, and that's one thing that I've really appreciated in standard a lot lately. And it's actually what's compelled me to buy sealed product because I haven't. The last time I bought sealed product before I bought a box of Neon Dynasty was Battle for Zendikar. That was the last actual like box that I bought, and the sets just they never really interested me. But as standard has been moving as of late for the past couple of years, particularly this year, it has made me a very casual type player to actually go out and engage with the product and buy the boxes because the cards are more unique. You're not seeing the same mind rot type of effects. Those are going in Foundation and that's staying there. Whereas you get your augmented set based mechanic enriched type cards in this set. You get your random counter spell that's reconfigured to fit the aesthetics of a certain plane or whatever. And I think that really has helped add to the value of standard because they've been trying to push that format a lot for the last year or so. Because it was last year, I believe, that Aaron Forsyth, or was it this year, where he said that a goal of Wizards for the next decade or so was to like really focus on standard. I think these are necessary steps that are really going to have to help the format. Is that it's really got to get juiced, because like what you were saying earlier, is one of the problems that Standard had for the longest time was the sets themselves weren't really juiced. It would be salt and peppered in a little bit. You get some really powerful cards, but it seems like they're really trying to push what they had been pushing with like Modern Horizons back into the premier sets. And there is some things about that includes Universes Beyond and pushing Lorwyn out to 2025 and so on and so forth. But the at least with what they've seen, that what they're trying in particular with Foundations, also literally providing that foundation, just really feels like it's Wizards doubling down and saying, hey, we're actually taking this seriously. We're not just focused on Commander, even though that's what a lot of players have been wanting for the last, I don't know, since COVID was a thing and people had to stay inside and all they could do was really play Commander. Now that we're back out into the real world, it seems that Wizards, well, they want to monetize on that. And so, especially with Foundations here, and I am an apologist for Foundations. I'm really positive about the set, maybe because it's just the nostalgia from seeing all my favorite cards from 15 years ago being put into the set, but also with a lot of the newer stuff that they're putting in there as well. It's just, there's something about the set that just, I mean, obviously I'm more
There
casual,
wasn't a lot of newer stuff. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So like that, you're right with Standard. Like they should be focusing on Standard, and they should. And I think that they finally gotten in this rhythm where Standard was getting better and where it was exciting. With look at the last three sets with Bloomborough, with Merger Call Manor, with Dustmorn, how it added a lot of new archetypes. It added this new vibrant of people brewing decks and archetypes were good enough to stick around too. So it was just the pool of available decks was getting quite large, and each new set too was shining. Like all the new mechanics of it were they're working, and it was working this rhythm. And now I'm just thinking that Foundations is putting too much noise now that we're going to have to always, now when a new set comes out, there's this pool of cards now that it's going to have to compete with for viability and Standard. And as I said, there's just a lot of duh stuff in Foundations that's going to guarantee these archetypes are always going to be a thing. So I just don't like it because, and maybe I just play too much Standard or have played too much Standard, or I've already indulged so much that these cards are boring to me now. We've seen them before. We've seen the Harmless Offering Demonic Pact combo. It wasn't that good back then. It was a cheese deck. Okay, so now we have that cheese deck back in Standard. Yay! Like that's the best way for me to articulate my feelings. Yay! Like it's just, and maybe if you are a new player and you haven't seen these things, then sure, it will be fun and interesting. But there's still a lot of cards that seem so out of whack too. Like it's like, geez, where are they going with this? These are all, yeah, like I said, they're washed up.
There are some random cards that I thought to myself, I was like, oh, that's gonna be a weird corner case that I'm gonna forget about until like 3 years from now. Like an Offer You Can't Refuse. Like that's kind of a weird card to put in a core set. And that was one of those weird edge corner cases that'll pop up probably every 6 months or so and get you.
Is it that's the counterspell, right? Offer You Can't Refuse?
Yeah.
Well, that was an expensive uncommon, mainly for Commander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious Wizards was doing some repo equity in this set too. But
well, that's what I was thinking is, it seems like it's going to be the Omega level kind of core set where instead of needing to print a core set every year and have a 24, a 25, 26 or whatever, you just have the one. And so it twofold for a business. One, you get a lot of people interested in just the one set, and it also just kind of looks good on paper in the long term. But also, you don't have to worry about having a summer core set for the next year that is more than likely going to sell under expectations, and then you're going to have to repeat that the year after that, because it's obvious that Wizards has always wanted some form of a core set in Standard. And I don't know what kind of internal discussions they have, but the fact that they keep going back to it and leaving it and going back to it tells me that they want that base there. They
Yeah.
want that accessibility of just the generic stuff. They just want the generic stuff just to have it there. And so this seems like this is their way to do that without also getting the concept of those cards in front of the profitability of having Final Fantasy in the summer set instead of core set 2026 or whatever.
But it wasn't. That's what I'm trying to articulate here. It wasn't like just your boring stuff. These had a lot of key mechanic. I mean, you got landfall, you got kicker, you got so many of these cards that were key mechanical cards of other sets. It just this set just to me seems like a hot mess. That's where I'm going with it.
Throwing
and
everything
then,
at the wall kind of
yeah.
set.
And to me, again, that's my worry. And maybe I'm still speaking of this. It's like it almost feels like this was too late. That if standard was how it was back in Throne of Eldraine or Aether, Kaladesh, where they needed like this core set for. I mean, one of the problems with Kaladesh is they didn't have enough artifact removal. They made this artifact set, but they didn't have a lot of ways to deal with these. And that was
straight up
the exact same
naturalized.
problem with Throne of Eldraine. It's like, okay, well, these cards would easily be able to be dealt with if we would have had the right pieces and if we would have had this foundation, this baseline of stuff. And I don't know. I just think that to reiterate my point, that Foundations was just too many cards that are now just stuck in standard. And I guess my idea of standard is probably different than most people where they want it to go, where I loved the rotation aspect of it. I loved how things, I mean, the best day in standard was rotation day. It wasn't necessarily the new cards coming in. It was like all the cards that are fun. I mean, Wandering Emperor going out of the format, best thing ever. It's just, and now imagine like Wandering Emperor in this set, which I'm surprised they didn't put Wandering Emperor in this set. I think that would have been a good foundational card. And like I have identified a couple of these that do seem, pretty problematic long term to always have them in standard. So
what would you say, or probably?
Well, Boros Charm is a big one.
Yeah.
I mean that is a modern power level card.
Mm-hmm.
And also some of these that are going to be very hard to beat their slot. So I mean, if they want another card specifically in a set coming out, like take Charming Prince for example. So if they want it into a set that's coming out now, okay, well we're gonna have to make it better than Charming Prince. So it creates a damned if you do damned scenario. Either they push out Charming Prince or they make a card that can't compete with it. So I mean, again, that's my biggest complaint with this particular set.
So at least with what I was thinking about here with Foundations is that at least one of the bigger issues that I take umbrage with the set, and this is probably going to be the last thing that I'm going to talk about with the set in general, is what you were saying earlier, is the massive size of the set. Like how many cards are in it? Like 400, 500, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's big. It's big, and it's...
Yeah, so when I think about that, it's... Like I said earlier, I've been buying packs a lot more. And when I hear about a set size like that, it kind of makes me want to reel back. And, I have plans with it. I plan on getting that intro starter bundle, whatever it's called, as
the starter collection.
Yeah, the starter collection as gifts for friends to like, hey, here's your starting point, your foundation. But when it comes to actually buying the set for myself, this is going to probably be the first one in a while where I'll probably buy a few packs and then I'm only just going to buy singles. Because the chances
there's no
getting
point.
The cards that I want is very, very small compared to a normal standard set. This is gargantuan. Like, this is akin to how core sets used to be. Like, wasn't revised in like 3rd edition like this big back in the day?
Yeah, and they stuck around for... I mean, revised was supposed to stick around for a long time.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of the problem with like revising 4th edition is then when 4th edition came out, they didn't really change that, and then 5th edition too. They didn't change a lot, so a lot of cards just stuck around. for a long, long time in those slots.
And it's
So I
not
don't
like
know.
Jumpstart helps either with that, because Jumpstart kind of adds to the confusion. Because
Yeah, well,
if you have a normal player going to Walmart and they don't know the difference between Jumpstart Foundations and just Foundations, and they don't know that the cards that don't have the star is not going to be standard legal.
yeah. I mean, this is a good
What
segue
are we
into our
doing?
next little topic here about the legality of Jumpstart. Why isn't Jumpstart? And I mean, this one drives me even more batty, is because I think a lot of the cards in Jumpstart were super flavorful and would love to see standard. And now they can't even go into. Are they even modern? They're not like what they go right into legacy. Like that's the like not even
Yeah.
into pioneer. And it was one of the sets earlier that it's either Dustmorn or Bloomborough. One of them had a card that was in the commander decks, and I'll have to find it for reference again. And in my opinion, it was a 1v1 card. I don't know why they put it in a commander deck anyway. I mean, it's okay in commander, but commander typically has its own flavor of cards that want to affect a lot more of the board state, want to affect multiple opponents. And it was mechanically thematic, so it was working with one of the Dustmorn or Bloomborough mechanics.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they just decided not to put it in the standard set and put it in the commander deck. I'm like, this would have been perfect for standard. and and now we don't get to play with it in standard. We have to like, and
Nope.
it's not, people are going to be cutting it out of that commander deck because, like I said, it wasn't like a 1v1. And worst of all is, when people are opening, they have those slots in collector boosters. So you can open it in collector's booster thinking, oh, this will be great in my raccoon deck. I think it was like a raccoon or something. And it's like, wait a second. You can't even play it in
You can't
standard.
even play it. Yeah.
And so the
Or
whole point of
just like
Foundations was to set this foundation for standard, and they create these cool themes in Jumpstart. They just
like
they don't even have a
I can
home.
imagine some kid opening that up, and then they get like what, a Dark Confidant, and then they're like,
Mhm.
oh, my Darkstar Augur is just like that card. Oh, I can have 8 Darkstar Augurs in my deck. No, sorry, kid, you can't, because it
But
just
then
doesn't know how to communicate that.
with them basically, and I get what they're doing standard too, because I think they should have changed this in years ago with their policy of like what makes a standard card, what makes a pioneer card, what makes a modern card. And the whole idea with standards, it had to be printed in a draft booster, uh, when they diverge from set to draft, so list slots and stuff. So it had to be in the draft booster to be eligible to be in the standard set. And then they had to rechange for Lord of the Rings to make it modern legal, because they wanted Lord of the Rings to at least have some sort of home with those cards. And then I was like, why don't they just allow the cards out of the commander sets to be legal in standard? A lot of them don't seem. I know they print, and I'm not talking about reprints. I'm talking about the cards that they printed from, or they came up with of those sets to go in this commander decks. Why in the world are they not standard legal? A lot of them aren't overpowered. They're not, and that would take away so much confusion with people opening up in set boosters at the time. Could have them in the slots,
Yeah.
and collector boosters had them. And if now what they are basically just like, in my opinion, is like kind of throwing their hands up in the air, like, well, we want Universes Beyond to have a place where it just doesn't go into Commander. A lot of, because to me, in my opinion, what they're doing with some of these Universes Beyond is they want to design cards that are 1v1. I mean, I think that they are really trying to go back to uh, flirting with 1v1 and real, like, because the worst part in the last few years you've missed is what we call the commanderification of Magic, where
Yeah.
every standard set was even more focused on commander than it was on standard or anything else. And commander cards started ruining the standard format because they'd have to push it enough to be able to see play in commander that ended up warping standard. And a lot of times when you make like this multiplayer card, like it ends up being so backbreaking or so uninteractive, or and not only is it on this high power level, it's just no fun to play against to begin with. And so, like, and then you see that, like I mentioned earlier, you see a card out of a commander set that's like, This would have been perfect in standard. It would have been perfectly on power.
What I don't get is why they don't just do the whole Yu-Gi-Oh approach to where everything that we print is just legal,
Yeah,
but have it sectioned off based off of how many years. So like everything that
exactly.
we print in this commander set is legal and standard for 3 years, and then it rotates out or whatever. You just do that with all the jumpstart cards. Hell, heaven forbid, it's probably the wrong thing to say, but Modern Horizons, whatever. Put Ocelot Pride into standard and see what happens, see what goes, because it's all eventually going to rotate out anyways, and you're not going to have access to Path to Exile or whatever in the same format or whatever else is in that Boros energy deck, like the Galvanic iteration. Is that what I'm thinking of? Or maybe I'm going a bit too far by saying put in Modern Horizons type sets, but I don't understand why, if Wizards of the Coast really wants to have all the eyes focused on standard, kind of making a bonanza, put everything in, give everyone all the tools to play.
Yeah, Modern Horizons was such a mistake. It just not only it makes standard so less appealing because, as we mentioned, people were like, "Oh, this cool standard card has a chance of actually seeing play in modern." And it's not like not anymore. Now they
And
pushed the power level so high with these Modern Horizon sets that
I think if you also printed everything into standard as well, I think it would also help solve the direct to modern kind of issue that they've had for the last 5 years or so, where ever since the first Modern Horizons, it was you're either playing Hogak or you're dead, and then that got banned out, and then you were just playing with the leftover cards from Modern Horizons, and then when Modern Horizons 2 came out, it was you were playing Darcy and Murktide Regent and all the other Fury, Grief,
Mhm.
all those types of cards. And now you're playing Boros Energy, or you're not playing at all, really. Or Eldrazi Tron, maybe, some of the cards in that set made that deck really good out of nowhere. But yeah, if Wizards of the Coast just stops focusing on trying to keep Eternal alive and just focus on standard and let the leftover pieces from that
yeah,
augment
that's what they
vintage and
used to do.
legacy and modern. Yeah, exactly what we had for the last 15 years up until 2020.
Those formats didn't need any help. I mean,
No.
their pools got bigger and bigger just naturally with standard cards.
Hmm.
And I mean they went through this whole period like, oh, we can't design these cards anymore because they're not going to be powerful enough. Well, if you didn't power creep to begin with and do the stupidest power creep ever by creating a power creep set, but
Yeah.
I I don't know, but it's too late now. I mean, it's water under the bridge now. Now they have to go back to the drawing board, and possibly foundations could be the solution, but I'm with you with the jump start and all this other stuff. It's just missed opportunities for another home for these cards.
Hmm.
So, and that's been my whole point with like trying to do leagues at my store, and what we do with leagues is basically just anything you open up in a pack is legal, because it actually gives these one of my biggest pet peeves, even with standard now, is the power level so high that I mean, go back to the set that I always like to refer to is March of Machines. There are
Hmm.
some cool cards in March of
There
Machines
are.
like Thalia and Gitrog Monster, for example. There are some. I mean, some are just two cards mashed together, sure.
Simone and
But
Dina, I can think of
yeah,
off the top of
yeah,
my head.
they're
Like, that card's
these
cool.
cards seem so fun if you could actually build a deck, but the power level of standard is really pigeonholed what is playable. Like mid range is very, very tough to play in standard unless you're specifically built on certain elements of a type of mid range. Like when we talk about archetypes with aggro, mid range, and control, like mid range oftentimes has a lot of different like, differences within that group. Like aggro decks are very similar, control decks are very similar, but then when we say mid range, there's like 20 different ways to build mid range deck. And right now in standard, I think there's only a few of them that are actually viable. It's the particular mid range decks that have enough staying power to be able to either be aggressive enough versus control, or be able to fight through control and have uh, plenty ways to stabilize versus these aggro decks. And in the past, though, we used to get in these like mid range battles that these mid-range decks would specifically come up to beat out other mid-range decks, and that is like really missing from standard because of how
Mm,
much they push control and aggro. That it really is okay. You play a mid-range deck that's good versus control / aggro, or you play aggro or control. And the March of Machines just seemed like there was a bunch of those type of cards that would have
yeah.
existed in yesteryears in these big mid-range battles. Like because this
Like
Gitrog versus
there's
Thali
that.
would take over some of those matchups. Where it's like, okay, this is going to be a value engine that's going to beat these mid-range, mirrors.
There was this card that evoked because one of my favorite cards from yesteryear was Blade Splicer, and there was a card from March of the Machine that was sort of like Blade Splicer, but it was X based and it was incubate, like it was like one in
Yeah.
white and
Yep.
like double X, and you could just stack up, and it reminded me a lot of Blade Splicer in particular because it was a fantastic mid range style card, and I feel like yeah, Standard has been needing that really bad. I mean, like I said earlier, I play black green mid range because I yearn for the Siege Rhino days.
Hmm.
I like the long, grindy type of games where eventually you just grind your opponent to dust. That's, besides playing tempo, that's probably my favorite way to play Magic. And that's something that Standard has really needed for a long time. There is some tools in Foundations where I think, that kind of helps add to that, where and there is some stuff outside of Foundations that helps, like Pyroclasm. I think Pyroclasm is going to be a very relevant card for the next 3 years.
Well, Paragon's is standard right now. Did it get reprinted in Foundations?
No, it was uh the most recent set, Duskborn.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know what's in there. I know there's a Pyroclasm effect in Foundations, but I think it's 3 mana.
It's the Slag Storm.
There's one that does 2 damage too. I was looking
Oh,
at it
is there?
earlier. Yeah.
Oh,
Like I said,
was
there's
it
a
that
lot of
dragon
redundancy
one? Yeah.
in this set. But I mean, well, speaking of like what I'm talking about though, if like that as I mentioned earlier with Foundations, like all the cards that have no chance of seeing play, it's like Angelic Destiny or Rally of the War Leader. Like I'm looking at all these mythics, I'm like, yeah, good luck. Good luck
Yeah,
versus
no,
Cruel
that's
Prowess
not
and
happening.
Atraxa. I mean, that's the problem. They've pushed those two ends of the spectrum have been pushed so much. That like uh Golgari midrange, for example, or Dimir midrange, you can play all sorts of synergy or combo or jank decks to compete against them. They're not these boogeymans that you have to answer stuff. I mean, they're
Yeah.
playing Magic. What the meta is defined right now is Atraxa and monstrous. I can't think of the stupid
Rage.
monstrous rage. And now even
Yeah.
worse, the Manifest Dread ones I think is even more powerful for
Mm.
the way they're particularly building it. And so those are the boogeymans that are defining the meta. And so any deck that can't win by turn 4 or can't stabilize by turn 2 is unplayable, completely unplayable because of the things. So a Johnny Collar Pride, no chance. It's not seeing play. Angelic
No.
Destiny, what's it gonna do? It's gonna be, and these are two cards: Johnny Collar Pride, Angelic Destiny. They saw standard play. Array of the War Leader saw standard play. Like I'm going through all of these cards, like just going back, Dragon Master Outcast, going right, Luna Dreadhorde General, going down all of this list of these ode to standards of yesteryears. I'm like, ah, has-beens. Primeval Bounty used to be a big mid-range mirror like
That's that
war card.
six
Like,
mana enchantment, isn't it?
yeah. And now just cast Atraxa. So
Yeah.
when they designed the set, I think they lost sight of where standard's gone. And I guess that's my
Well,
big pet peeve with
here's
it.
with that being said, where standard's gone. What about where standard is going? Okay, so obviously we talked about Atraxa. That's going to rotate out this next year, right? If I'm thinking
Yeah,
correctly.
it will.
Okay, so we'll at least lose that. The monstrous rage deck, that's not going to rotate out for another 3 years.
No,
So
and
we're
it's
just gonna have
so
to deal
deep.
with Heartfire Hero and monstrous rage until 2027. But do you think, at least with how the future is going, and what they said is when they're like pushing Lorwyn back for another quarter in lieu of another Universes Beyond set, do you think that they are, or would you assume that they have the capability to design around Foundations and having Foundations be relevant 2 years, 5 years into the future.
Well, I mean, obviously they want it to be relevant because
Right.
I mean that was the whole point of it. And I mean it will be. I mean there's cards in here that, like I said, there's not. I mean unless they do some major power increases on some of these cards, they're going to see play.
Mm-hmm.
But
all right, so with that all out of the way, now that we've gotten our grievances out with Foundations, I want to talk about our favorite cards in the set. And so my first one that I'm going to be going over, we're going to go over the top 5 of each of our favorite cards here. And my first, we talked about it earlier, but my number 5 is going to be Bolt Wave. And for those of you that don't know, it is 1 mana. It's a lava spike, deals 3 damage to each opponent. So it could have commander relevancy. No, definitely not. But it is.
no, it's good in commander.
You do think it's good in commander?
Oh yeah. So lava spike does to one opponent. So this one does to all opponents. Commander for a long time has had many cards that work off the amount of damage you've done to your opponents. So one that comes to mind is Nahab. So that card and Nahab were just perfect. I mean, it's they're gonna love each other. Eternal. Yeah, so I mean that card's gonna be perfectly in that slot. It's a very fairly popular commander, but I mean there's other commanders that deal with like dealing amount of damage, and so that basically does 9 damage for 1 mana.
Yeah,
and so it's commander playable.
Yeah, and my only modern deck that I have built is Burn, and I've been looking for any reason that I can to get rid of Lightning Helix out of the deck. This is finally going to be the card that pushes Lightning Helix out of the deck. I mean,
Lightning Helix is in standard.
Huh? Yeah, it is in standard.
And you have Boros Charm. You literally, we literally have modern Burn now. Minus the fetch lands, because you have Lightning Helix, Boros Charm. You don't have Lightning Bolt, but you have Lightning Helix, Boros Charm. Strike.
We have Shock.
Yeah, Lightning Strike, which is Shock.
We have Burst Lightning. A little bit weaker.
Burst Lightning's coming back with this one, which is just a strict upgrade to Shock, right? Or is it Sorcery Speed?
It's instant speed, right? It's instant. I think
it's just a strict upgrade to Shock. Jeez. Yeah, we have a powerful standard.
And you have good creatures. You have the Viashino Pyromancer, and then you have the Gitu Lava Runner.
Yeah, so that's a route you can go. You still have Monastery Swiftspear.
All we're missing is Wizard's Lightning. And we pretty much just have.
I'm surprised they didn't put that in Foundations, because they have the Wizard theme in there. That's weird they didn't put it in there.
It'll probably get pushed in a set.
Because it was in, because Viashino was one of the cards that synergized with it, and then Blue had that entire Wizard archetype, which could have easily, and a lot of Wizards in the blue white and in the blue like red. Yeah, weird they didn't.
Yeah, because we got Tempest Djinn in the set, so it's kind of weird that we didn't get, or I don't know if they put Adeliz the Cinderwind in the set, but
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm a Burn fanboy, and I love seeing a new Lightning Bolt for my deck, and so that's my number 5. What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Anthem of Champions. So I've been complaining for a long time that Celestia has basically been pushed out of playability. The way that Celestia likes to play is go wide. And unfortunately, it used to be good versus the other, Celestia would typically beat stuff like Gruul, because Gruul wants to go big, and Celestia would go bigger and wider oftentimes. But Gruul was good because it was hasty, so it was good versus control. So Magic always been beautiful because it not always has rock, paper, scissors, but they've always had little rock, paper, scissors, lizard, it's had lots of them. And unfortunately, I feel like Simic and Celestia have not had a really good home. I mean, the way that you traditionally built these decks for a long time in Standard, because of the way they pushed the aggression in, especially Gruul. So when you're playing green, you're be wanting to either pair it with red to have that haste, be able to push through damage, to be able to beat the control decks, or you pair it with black, because then you can play the tempo-based strategy of killing your opponent's creatures and then dropping a. So it's made Celestia's just had this very awkward. And Blueburrow has a really good Celestia cards, and it's still kind of sad that it can't really compete. So I think Anthem of the Champions is the right move because it's this glorious Anthem type effect. These have traditionally been either 3 mana, or if they were 2 mana, they have some sort of downside that you had to either turn on somehow or attach to something else. So Anthem of Champions is a pretty straightforward card that's like, okay, this is going to be a Celestia type effect. It's going to be a discount because it is specifically for Celestia, and I mean that's what used to make drive me batty when they used to make these in like hybrid cards, because it's like, well, this isn't Celestia, now it's just gonna go in mono white. and
Yeah.
so so this is specifically like, okay, we see this hole in Celestia, this probably is something. And as far as standard is concerned, I think it pairs really well with the 1 drop of whenever an enchantment comes into play. So you have basically a 3/3 on turn 1, and then cards like Mirrex
Mm,
or Fountain Port now get a lot better. You can just slap this down with some of the other aggressive creatures. So I actually have a Celestia deck right now. I think this goes perfect in, because there's the little squirrel that whenever it gets targeted gives something +1/+1 counter, and then it has Offspring for 2. Like a perfect card again. If you're casting this on turn number 3 after an Anthem, you're basically getting 2/2/2s. And so
yeah.
it just like the difference between 3 and 2. Like a lot of new players don't understand that 1 mana is massive, and it
Yeah.
wasn't that big of a deal in standard until standard became the power level of modern, early modern days. And
They're
now
gonna
2 to
find out
3
with
is,
Land War Elves. They'll
yeah.
find out.
Well, I'm actually glad that Llanowar Else is. I didn't pick any cards that are um, reprints for this, but Llanowar
Mm.
Else is like, I don't know why Wizards moved away from green being able to ramp on turn number 1.
They
Yeah,
should have always
they've
kept it.
pushed they've pushed some weird things, made them better than ever. And then at the same time, they've nerfed a lot of things that I think weren't broken to begin with, that were kind of necessary. So
I do like that
anyway,
they just have this actual, here's your basic anthem. We're not going to attach it to a creature or anything like that, or it's not going to be a, glorious anthem, which we've already seen before. But yeah, I really like Anthem of Champions. I had to do a triple take on that card just to, make sure that, it wasn't part of a fire design and that there wasn't some secondary effect on it. But
mhm.
very clean, simple design. Looks beautiful with the new styling of the Theros enchantment bordering that is going to be standard from now on. And yeah, I'm totally down with you on Anthem of Champions. Also, I just like saying that. It just rolls off the tongue really well.
Yeah.
And so my number 4, we already talked about it briefly. My number 4 is Sphinx of Forgotten Lore. It's 4 mana for a 3/3 flash flyer, and whenever it attacks, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback, so it's half of a Snapcaster type of effect, stapled on double the cost with an evasive body. Now, I know this is probably not going to be a long-term kind of finisher, but at least for at least how I used to play Magic, this does evoke a lot of what I used to really like about Magic. And I haven't really thought or brewed very much with it now, but now that I'm thinking about it and as we're talking about it, it almost seems like this might be interesting in like a go over the top style of not necessarily Voltron, but kind of prowess e deck, having an evasive threat that triggers off of attack. You can either flashback some sort of tempo spell or flashback a pump spell and, get your wins in that way. Now, Torrential Gearhulk isn't in the set, is it?
No,
No. This
no,
is this set's version of Torrential Gearhulk.
sort of. So this card's a lot different. Typically, I hate these type of cards because they push a particular type of strategy. Um,
Mm.
but I mean, this one's also my number 4, by the way. So,
Oh, is it?
and I have the if anyone is curious, I'll be doing a top 10 list, so you can definitely see this one actually is my number 4. But what I like about Sphinx though is it forces you to play outside that Torrential Gearhulk. So Torrential Gear is
Mm.
basically this Drago type strategy where you slap a flash creature, you cast it on their turn, you still keep up their mana. Sphinx forces you to spend that mana on your turn, which I think is a lot
Mm.
more fair. And also makes you build the deck a little bit differently, which is a lot more, in my opinion, stomachable to play and play against.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, you're gonna be slapping this down on turn number 4 and then swinging in and hopefully getting some value out of it. It's just a value engine basically.
Yeah. I certainly like it more than I did the because I used to play Blue Green Flash back in like 2019, 2020, and your 4-drop was that Night Pack Ambusher, where if you
Hmm.
didn't play anything on your turn, you just made wolves. I like this more, just because it wants you to play with your deck more and breathe new life into your spells that you've already played. And personally, I just like that more than just creating a bigger board presence, even though probably if you compare them side to side, maybe Ambusher might edge out Sphinx of Forgotten Lore due to the law of averages. But I think this card is just cooler and
Yeah.
spicier and way more interesting to play around with.
Well, again,
Um,
I like balanced cards. That's the whole thing. I think that this is the way you balance it. It forces you to. It doesn't turn it into a draw go strategy. It turns it
yeah,
into like a tempo. You have to spend it on your turn. Yeah, I mean, you
yeah,
want the advantage out of Sphinx of Forgotten Lore. You cast your basically how this is gonna work. What I really like in standard right now is it's gonna match up really well against like other tempo based strategies as well as the Gruul Prowess types decks because you're gonna be like duressing or removing a creature, and then you flash in your Sphinx of the Forgotten Lore on a turn where you don't have to play something. So, in a turn, Sphinx comes in, and then you can swing with it. And then, okay, I got another dress I can use. I can use another, but then it forces you to start going on kind of the initiative at that point. It doesn't like
yeah,
going back to the wolf. Yeah, that's just Drago. You flashed in a turn. Oh, now hold up stuff. Wait till my opponent does something, and you just that's how the entire, in my opinion, is boring to play against. And
yeah.
this one does a much better job with the kind of the flow of how the game is going to be directed at that point.
I prefer my cards to ask me a question. And that's what a card like Sphinx of Forgotten Lord does, is it puts the onus on you to
Mm-hmm.
actively play the card rather than have the card play itself for you,
Mm-hmm.
which was something that like Night Pack Ambusher did, where
Yep.
it was
Or
kind
Trench
of
with the
in that
Heroka.
era where it was you just play the deck as it was pre-made in the set and then the sets around it, and then yeah, you just sit back and let your opponent just kind of fumble around as you just continue tossing counter spells and building wolves. So for your number 4, obviously I took your number 4. Do you want to
Want me to pick another
use
one?
a different card? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll do what was my number 6, which is Ravenous Amulet, which isn't like it's kind of pretty innocuous card, but one of the problems in standard right now, and one of the problems with a lot of standards is you don't have a very reasonable sack outlet. And Ravenous Amulet just seems to be the perfect. Again, it seems like a very boring innocuous card, but it gives you a the sorcery spirit is a little bit awkward on it. So it's just
Mm,
one in tap, sacrifice a creature, draw a card, and you put a soul counter on it. But basically, a mini skull clamp type ability on a.
yeah.
I mean, you can't repetitively use it over and over, but each turn, I kind of just like this type of effect of existing in standard, and it's. I think the mana is nice and reasonable, and then 4 and tap, you can sacrifice each opponent loses life equals number of soul counters on it, sure, but there are a lot of cards that want to die and want to get some sort of value from dying, and I think this one's a perfect little medium for it. Like I said, pretty boring card, but this is where this is the type of stuff I like to see in Foundations because this is gonna be available for going forward of any if we need to have that 56th through 60th card in your deck that enables certain cards or strategies. This one's going to be available for 5 years too. It doesn't define any archetypes. It just kind of meshes well with these type of things. So
That this is well, yeah, this could be like the centerpiece of a lot of different decks. You know what I was thinking of is this is an archetype that I think I remember you were talking about a long time ago on old Rogue Deck Builder videos, but the strategy of active treason,
yeah,
and then you
yep, that's
sack
another one
it.
that's fun with them. Yep, I always try to build these with, and it's just one man. Yeah, one man is perfect. It's coming actually the turn before you're going to start grabbing things. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, it is a very spicy card. I had never noticed this before, and I'm looking at the art, and it's pretty sick as well.
yeah, it was tough
It
actually
seems
with.
very Innistrad.
One of my complaints too is I typically like to pick a lot of commons and uncommons, and it seems like they put all the spicy stuff in like the rare slot, and the
Hmm.
uncommons were kind of boring. It's a lot of reprints, and then a lot of just kind of safe cards that didn't a 3/3 trample it gets bigger for 3 mana, that type of stuff. It's like ah, so
Yeah. Well, that and it being just generic and not requiring any kind of colored cost really helps a
Hmm.
lot with it as well. This is definitely a card where I can see it kind of having a lot of corner cases. And also, this is not the type of artifact where it's going to require a lot of focus and attention. So it's one of those things where you could probably not have to worry about your opponent sideboarding and removal just for your Ravenous Amulet
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
It seems very nice. All right, so my number three, and forgive me if I end up stealing another one of yours. My number three is a callback to one of my favorite cards of Magic's past, which I'm drawing a blank on it now. Return to the Ranks. Return to the Ranks used to be one of my favorite cards that I loved playing back in the day, especially in Standard. There was a Nantuko Husk Collected Company style deck where you would just slap your opponent in the face with a Return to the Ranks and usually win that way.
Hmm.
Well, in Standard and in Foundations, we have Raise the Past, which is pretty much the same card, but except now it's just a solid 4 mana. You get to return all your creatures with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Whereas opposed to Return to the Ranks, it was an X cost card. This one, very clean. 4 mana, bring all your small stuff back. Great for very low to the ground decks that want to be aggressive. Or if you have like an Aristocrats style deck, this is a good top of the curve style finisher where you can bring everything back, sack it all, get a whole bunch of triggers.
Well, yeah.
Seems.
So you stole my number one.
Oh my god, I am. I needed it. Oh my goodness, I'm so
But yeah, so
sorry.
right here in this frame, it's all dusty here. I don't know if I'm holding that up correctly with the. I got my framed Immortal Servitude. So this card actually
Mm,
reminds me more of Mortal Servitude than it does like Return of the Ranks. Return of the Ranks, you had some weird, um, like end a turn, bring everything, sack everything in. So yeah, in this frame is Immortal Servitude. So this copy of Immortal Servitude, I top decked for in my top eight
mm-hmm.
against it was Jeskai Control at the time, and only Immortal Servitude would have got everything back. So I was playing a Squadron Hawk Soul Sisters list, and so Johnny's Pride Mates, Squadron Hawks, lots of 2 drops, and then I cast it Immortal Servitude for 2, brought everything back, and was able to win the game off of it. So these type of cards have always been catnip for me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the few times I actually was one of my decks was showcased on the mothership was Immortal Servitude as well. That was bringing back like a bunch of burglar rats and there was a creature out of can't remember what set that just had an activated ability of sacrificing itself to draw a card, and so it was just that the value engine was Immortal Servitude. And
Mm-hmm.
so these type of cards, whenever I see them, I'm in a brew with them. I think this one is very reasonable too because it's just strictly better than like Immortal Servitude because it's 2 or less. So Immortal Servitude, you had to either name 1 or 2, and they did come up with another version. I think this is just like a functional reprint of another card because I believe there was one that did 2 or less, just like
Mm-hmm.
this. Rally the. Okay, wait. There's Return of the Ancestors, Rally the Ranks, right? Am I getting the
Or Rally the
two?
Ancestors? Is that what I'm
Return to the
thinking?
Ranks and Rally the Ancestors. Return to the Ranks. What does Return to the Ranks do? If I
Is
remember
Return of the Rings the
correctly.
one that I was thinking of?
So Rally the Ancestors is like an X, and it's instant speed. And so let's see, Return of the Ranks. I'm popping that one up. Okay. Uh, so Return of the Ranks is X, white, white. And return X target creature cards with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield as convoked.
Okay, yep.
So that's
Okay, yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, yeah.
so yeah. Now I'm trying to think the other card. No, there was basically a functional reprint of this with this like very similar to Raise the Past. Rally the
Was it
Ancestors
Rally?
was
Okay, yeah. Okay,
Rally the
sorry. I know
Ancestors
what you're
was
thinking.
a very popular card in like they started off with Coco shells, collected company shells, and then people realized, okay, well this actually like collected company rotated out, and they basically kept the deck almost the same. So they used a lot of value
Mm,
creatures, and then if your opponent like board wiped or stuff, you just got them all back with Rally the Ranks, and there was some combo decks with it too, but they sacked at the end of
yeah.
turn, I believe. So you just got everything from one turn.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Rally
Yeah,
the
so.
ancestors, rally the ancestors. There is Rally the Ranks even. Jeez. They're running out of card names.
Right? It's just at this point, it's just word soup.
Well, that's another thing I've noticed too. Like I said, they like some of these cards. I was noticing a card like they just slapped Impact Tremors and something else on this, like, oh, here's 2 cards, let's mash them together. Yeah, rather the ancestors actually turn each creature card with current mana cost extra less, but then you have to exile them at the beginning of your next upkeep. So you get to stick
Okay,
around
yeah.
for like 1 turn. But yep, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
so Raise the
that
Past
that was
actually
the deck
seems
that you played with Nantuko Husk. Now I remember.
yes,
Okay.
because you could sack
Yeah.
everything and you're basically trying to combo in 1 turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, the deck like morphed into because it was like the they did play like Collected Company, and then oftentimes it was like a sideboard card, and then all of a sudden be like, wow, this is actually like, and I believe it's still Pioneer playable. I've seen some rally decks in Pioneer
I
that
haven't thought
still use
about
the
that
shell.
card since it rotated.
Yeah.
Man, that was a long time ago. So I keep stealing all your best cards. So why don't you do me a favor and we'll switch orders and you take control of the narrative now, but I'll give you the opportunity to talk about another card in substitution. But what is your number 3?
My number 3 is Tiny Bones Bauble Burglar. I
Hmm.
want this card to be good. It probably won't be. I think it needed to have Ravenous Rat's ability on it, because now that I'm seeing situations of how this is going to play out, Tiny Bones is weird because oftentimes you want to discard on turn number 1, and so you're not going to get the effect of Tiny Bones. And I wish they either made this a 1-drop or made this have a Ravenous Rat's effect on it. So Tiny Bones is 2 mana for a 1/3, and whenever opponent discards a card, you exile it from their graveyard with a stash counter, and then during your turn you may play cards you don't own with stash counters on them from exile, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those cards, and it's got 4 mana untapped, and each opponent discards a card. So yeah, that ability might come into play. It's actually pretty good in controlled base shells. The problem is it activate only as a sorcery means you can't wait till they untap, upkeep, draw, make them discard. I mean, you typically Wizards does balance it that way. There are very few instances where things have slipped by where you can discard cards not as sorcery speed. But this is just your typical build me around card. It's going to take some work. Like I said, it doesn't go in some obvious curves with like Thoughtseize or Duress because it's a 2-drop. So at that point, do you want to be duressing on turn number 3? Maybe. But
Hmm.
where it's really fun is the kind of the wheel type discard effects, and just anything that discards a lot of cards is, pretty decent. And the whole exiling is pretty neat too. So they don't get to recur any of the cards that come back. Actually, synergizes pretty decently with Liliana in standard now. So turn 2 Tiny Bones, turn 3 Liliana. If you into an empty board, typically you're killing a creature with Liliana. But again, these type of cards I always love to build around. And yeah, so we'll have to see if this one does work. But again, looking at it, it just seems very, very awkward. It's going to make a fun commander for sure, but not a
Yeah,
commander player myself.
this
But
card does make me think a lot about like rack style decks. Now I don't know if this would actually be good in that kind of deck, but obviously like a rack style commander type deck, this would be sweet. Do you think it has any parity with something like, say, Liliana of the Veil in
yeah,
standard?
well, that's what I'm saying, because it does curve with Liliana. Because turn
Okay.
number, yeah. But it curves better with, there are some 3 mana discard cards um, that work well. There's actually quite a bit of, the deck that I'm running right now in standard is playing the enchantments that just come in and make opponent discard a card. Where Tiny
Hmm.
Bones gets better though is we specifically can pick a card to discard. But there's actually quite a bit. There was a mono black discard deck in standard for a while there until
Hmm.
some of the decks became too hostile for that one to survive. But again, it's in
Do we
a
have
really
any like
awkward spot.
Megrim style effects in standard right now?
You do. But I don't think that's where Tiny Bones is playing that role, because you want some sort of value out of making your opponent have no cards or discarding cards, and Tiny Bones is doing
Hmm.
that. So
Yeah.
basically, they're discarding cards, you get to use their cards against them. Um, so it
Because
isn't. It is a neat little card.
that was one of the weaknesses of discard decks was, sure, you got rid of their hand, but at the cost of attrition you also have no cards left in
Yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
and so Tiny Bones provides you extra gas.
Yep. Yep.
Very interesting card. I mean, I had seen it and read it a little bit, but it was one of those kind of like, that's a lot of words, I'll read it when someone plays it against me type of situations. But now that I'm actually looking at it and hearing the way that you're talking about it, I was a bit more favorable towards Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, but Tiny
Mhm.
Bones Bauble Burglar seems more like in the direction that I would want to go in a creature based on this, where you are getting repeated style value. You know what this card reminds me of a lot is, obviously without the haste, reminds me of Robber of the Rich.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, there's a
And
few cards that do this sort of effect. I mean, it's nothing new,
yeah,
but yeah, it's
very interesting effect. And so because you took your number one, and we're gonna shift the order, we'll just skip right up to your number two, and I'll go with my number two afterwards. So what's your number two?
this is kind of just another good card. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
around this one is like Synergy or Brew Around, which is typically the cards I pick. This is Spinner of Souls. So it's just a 4/3 reach for 3 mana, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may reveal a card from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card, put that card in your hand, and the rest in the bottom of the order. So it's already above curve here. You get a 4/3 for 3
Four
mana,
three
which
for
is,
three.
yeah, and in reach, which is relevant right now. And
It's
it
relevant
doesn't,
against that 4-drop Sphinx.
it's relevant against, is the Djinn right now 4 toughness? Or is it 5?
Yes, yes, I'm
The
pretty sure
Oculus
Tempest
is,
Jin
the
is an
Oculus is
04.
5.
Yeah.
But what I like about this card though is it's, I mean, there's a lot of build me. There actually is a lot of build me around, but this particular card though, they board wipe. I mean, right now the a bunch of the sweepers are exile effects, but I mean, Fumigate and Day of Judgment though, if they do board wipe after a Spinner of Souls, you're going to get some value, at
Yeah,
least. And so,
absolutely.
unfortunately, it isn't replacing itself. Like it does say whenever another non-token creature. But I mean, here's your perfect little synergy with like Ravenous Amulet or any other type of sacrifice-based effect. You can start getting value out of your creatures that want to die. Um, you can start, trading with other creatures. It does it. I guess the more and more I look at it, it does have a lot of these build me around type effects. So, and you
This
don't
is
miss, right? So you reveal cards top of your
yeah.
library until you reveal a creature card. Yeah. So you don't miss. So I was even
It's my
thinking
first
about building a.
idea. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Oh yeah, you can build like a wombo combo with this. With I'm thinking about like hangerback walkers and walking ballistas, and I mean there's the serpent with the X spells that
Oh, Stone Coil Serpent.
you can cast them for 0. They come and kill themselves, and so when you
Yeah.
die, like Blood Artist effect,
Oh,
um,
and then
they'll
wheel into like a Emrakul
and
or whatever.
and then or yeah, and then let me look at Raise the Past right there, and then you get them all like
Yeah, you get it
right
all
right
back.
there. So
Yeah.
Raise the Past, the Blood Artist effect, a bunch of those, and then they'll see each other. You'll hopefully, I mean, you'll find some other spinners, but if you build your deck correctly, you'll find enough 0 uh, drop cards that then you'll be
Mm.
able to basically cycle through everything. And so I think this card's a lot like obviously they created this card for like board wipe effects, but there's a lot of juicy things I think that can be done with it.
Yeah, this is interesting. Like, it might pair well with like evoke creatures. If we're going back to Lorwyn, there's a decent chance that we'll see evoke. So this
Mm-hmm.
could have synergies with that. What I was thinking of is this is a card that I would love to put clone effects on and
Mm-hmm.
just have a whole bunch of spinner souls and get like 3 or 4 triggers going off all at once. Seems pretty interesting. Just find more clones and more spinners of souls. The
Yep.
4/3 reach on that for 3 mana, that is a wild stat. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
I'm
lie.
loving they're doing this with a lot of cards. They're putting relevant bodies on them. So it used to be you go clear back in like Wizards design is if it had like a massive upside, they'd always nerf the power and toughness somewhere. And now I and then that makes them like super unplayable because the way they balance especially standard right now is you need this curve you need these cards to work against control, to be able to be clocks against control or be able to trade versus aggro. And so, yeah, it makes it so you can't have this baseline vanilla creature like it used to be a 4/3 for 3 mana. There is the upside. It's above curve. But I mean, there's no problem with putting some abilities on or putting some relevant power and toughness on these cards that they want to have these synergistic abilities just to make sure they actually have a fighting chance of actually seeing play.
Yeah, and kind of goes with what you were saying earlier about your kind of issues with the set. Is that at the very least you get at it seems one or two cards. I don't know if you'll talk about it later, but my number one for sure seems like one of those cards where it's designed to like actually make an impact and somewhat stay. This card seems like it is meant to be the not the top of the green curve, but very much in the. It will not only gum up the board, but it'll also put a clock on your
Hmm.
opponent fast if they're not careful with a card like this. It reminds me of what's that 3 mana 5/4 that can't be blocked by a creature with power 2 or less? Steel Leaf Champion, is that what I'm thinking of?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what this kind of reminds me of. Obviously, it's not as clean of a design, but it's more kind of this is more of a synergy based card, but still, it is juice to all hell. And so, even if you're not reading the paragraph below, 3 mana for 3 reach, it's kind of hard to argue against that. I mean,
Yeah.
having that as a vanilla is decent. This right here, it's kind of cream of the crop, honestly.
Yeah.
All right, and so for my number two, this is a card that pairs well with Sphinx of Forgotten Lore, and it's also just a great tempo card in general. And I've been talking a lot with a friend about this, and what's funny is one of my old favorite modern decks used to be Ninja Bear Delver, and had we had a card like this, it would have been so great for it. My number two is Fey Bloom Trick, which is 2 and a blue for an instant. Create 2 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying, period. When you do, tap target creature an opponent controls, which, first off, I'll say I'm really glad that they changed the ordering in the sentence, so you still get your creatures no matter what, as opposed to if the sentences were in the reversed order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they remove the creature, you don't get your 2 1/1s.
Mm-hmm.
At the very least, for 2 mana or for 3 mana instant speed in blue, you get 2 evasive tokens. Seems pretty great. And then you also get the sleep effect, which this is kind of the perfect tempo card in my opinion. If you were to ask me to design the perfect tempo card, I wouldn't have been able to get this because personally I think this is the perfect tempo kind of design. And also I find that it pairs really well with that Sphinx when you want it to be more aggressive and you cast it, make a couple blockers for your next turn, and then also tap down their flyer and smack them with a 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
So
And that point on, well, yeah, you'd have to. It'd be another turn later. I was saying it could be on a curve, but not quite.
no,
The Sphinx doesn't have haste. Yeah.
But this is my number two. Not because I necessarily think it's going to be great in standard, but I find it to be a very
Yeah, I mean, it could
top of
definitely. It's playable for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, to get 2 evasive bodies for 3 mana is fine. At instant speed, it's sort of like right there. And the upside of tapping something down, like even look at it in standard, it's tapping down something they, a Gruul Prowess deck, tap it down for a turn, get your 2/1s.
Definitely. All right, and so obviously I stole your number one, but would you like to talk about another card?
Yeah, we could do mine. We could do my number 6. So that one's
your other number 6,
or my number 7 then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My number 7 is Kaikar Zephyr Awakener. Now there have been a couple cards printed like this in the past. It's 3/4 flying for 4 mana, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can X another target creature you control and return it on the battlefield under its controllers at the beginning of the next end step, or create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Now 4 drops is pretty hard to make them stick around in, because you need this to be, as I mentioned earlier, they're stabilizing or winning. So attracted X, you have to be winning by then, and against Gruul, you'll need to be stabilizing. But it's kind of fun if we do get these mid-range kind of value wars going on. This card's cool. So if you have any sort of card with an ETB effect, then you can start flickering it, or it's a way to save some of your creatures because you can exile them and return them to the battlefield at the next end step. And so, admittedly, like I've just been looking at this, like it probably doesn't have a place with that hefty 4 mana. Before you, typically these type of abilities you want to get active before. I mean, even like Monastery Mentor is really rough because there's a big difference between young Pyromancer being ultra playable even though there's a couple of them that aren't seeing play right now in standard. But then
Hmm.
in Monster Mentor, which has a much better effect, but that
Yeah.
made on turn number 3 is brutal because that's a whole nother turn when you're already trying to either like your turn 3 is when you want to be a lot more active, not just slapping down your engine at that point. So Kiker though I think has enough synergies to have fun with, and it's a you don't have to target it with them too. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so you can counter your
Yeah.
opponent's spell and flicker something, or create a 1/1. So it's pretty neat. I like this card a lot.
Yeah. This is also another one card. While I was reading it, I was like, "Ooh, Fabling Trick would be an interesting card to play with this."
Yeah, you get
Because
3 of them.
yeah, exactly. You get 3 little flyers, and you get to, or well, you could get the 3 creatures in total, but it's that flicker effect that really, I've been. Don't get me wrong. I like Brago. He's clearly the best Blink commander, besides maybe I don't know Room of the Hidden Realm. But
Mm-hmm.
if you want to go Blink, you want to play Brago. Kaikar, on the other hand, kind of looks like if you're playing more of like a storm sort of based blink kind of effect where you're just really abusing or exploiting a specific ETB. Kaikar kind of seems like that'd be decent for that as well as
Well, it
providing
does come back
blockers.
at the beginning of the next
The
end
next
step.
end step,
So it
yeah,
doesn't flicker right back in. So it
yeah.
actually has that safety valve that it can't be broken with loops
You
or
can't just loop it, yeah,
you know.
over and over
But
again. Wizards can't let us have all the nice things, just some
kind of wish
nice
it would have
things.
let it blink itself too, because then it would have been able to um get some board
Redo
wipe, for
the
example.
thing, yeah. Oh yeah, you could do that. But I mean, I would assume if you're playing Kaikar, you gotta at least be playing Unsummon
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Kaikar as
Or you
well.
have negates and things that can get around that sort of thing. But
Yeah. All right. And so, with that out of the way, I guess we'll go with my number one. Again, apologies for stealing all the steam from you there on your number one. Next time, I'll probably ask a third party to overlook both of our lists to tell me, hey, you're overlapping here. Choose a different card. But now, my number one, I am a Timmy. I've always been a Timmy. And when I look at cards like Sire of Seven Deaths, man, it fires off neurons in my brain. So Sire of Seven Deaths, all you got to know is that it just deals with the number 7. 7 colorless mana for a 7/7 with 7 of the best keywords that you've ever seen on a creature. You got First Strike, Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Lifelink, and Ward pay 7 life. Now, this is obviously going to be the Reanimator replacement once Atraxa leaves the format. If I had to take a guess of a card that would replace Atraxa, it would be this card whenever she rotates out. What do you think about Sire of Seven Deaths?
yeah, I mean it's a decent reanimation, and 7 isn't like, since this is colorless, there could be some ways to uh ramp into it without having the problems of getting all the colors for Atraxa.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen a similar card to this, just in the form of what's the one that's in Brothers War right now? That's a 7/7 Menace Lifelink Ward. It's got basically Ward 7 as well.
The worm or whatever
Yeah,
that has
snake or worm or
prototype.
something. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's under the right circumstances, it's definitely playable. So definitely a Timmy card though, for
it
sure.
absolutely is. It's one of those kind of designs where it just, the cartoon effect of like the eyes getting big and your
Oh,
tongue hitting the floor.
hey, I already got a deck for it.
Oh yeah.
So in Aftermath, there is the card that when it comes into play, you can exile a card from a graveyard and it gains all the keywords.
Oh,
So,
beautiful.
I mean, that's how it is. So, and I was actually, when that card was spoiled out of Aftermath, I'm like, man, we actually have a kind of some weird. Well, there definitely was a lot of keywords, but they're all over the place and so many different colors. To
Hmm.
get like, so here's a colorless card that you can hardcast in deck. You can reanimate it. You're in black, you're in this as well, or you can just exile it and you get those keywords, and it'll be basically, you won't get the ward, but you'll be a 3/3 at that point with all those keywords.
Are there any Elvish Piper style effects in Standard right now?
Yeah, there's loot that kind of does that. I mean, you dig.
Oh,
Well, I guess no, because it gets is how many lands you have in play, right? But I swear there is an Elvish Piper type effect. Maybe there's not.
well, oh, I was going to say, isn't there just straight Elvish Piper? But I'm actually thinking of Fauna Shaman, which that's nothing like that card at all. If there is an Elvish Piper style of effect, I assume that's probably going to be the kind of home where a card like Sire Seventh Deaths would want to live in, at least initially, one would think. But with that out of the way, so that's our top 5 Foundations cards. Now, for the final subject that I would like to talk about tonight, and this is more relevant with you than it is for me because I'm just a lowly player, but this actually affects you financially. Talk to me about the return of MSRP.
So of course it's a mixed bag because Wizard of the Coast gave us a big middle finger with this MSRP, which I don't know where they're going with. So let's just talk industry standard. So industry standard for board games, other card games, if you look at Pokemon, is a markup of usually your margin is about 42%. So basically that's your profit margin. You're gonna make if that's their manufacturer's suggested retail price is usually the margins are 42%. So if you do the math with what they've made, the MSRP for going forward. Anyway, they've actually listed Foundations and Innistrad Remastered, but it's about 33%. So it's like, okay, Wizards. So you're setting this baseline of you're basically conceding those margins that we're going to be less profit margins. We're going to expect less profit margins for our retailers than all of their competitors' projects or competitors' products, because we have a pretty easy 1-for-1 here. We have Pokemon, and you can go on Pokemon's website and you can buy it for MSRP, which is those 42%. It's like it's industry standard. It's basically that's
They have vending machines. Like I can go to my local grocery store and I can go buy Pokemon tin or booster packs out of a vending machine at MSRP.
yes. And yeah, and that's a good thing too is this what they're going to be? This is weird too, because I believe someone will have to fact check me here. Is this how much they're selling for at Walmart Foundations?
I assume that's what I assume it would be.
Because that's not how much they're selling for the other products. That's what I'm saying. It just didn't add up with what it's going for, because I believe aren't bundles like 55 at the Walmarts. And again, it's I don't know if it's going to go back up for these sets coming out, because it does specifically say Magic the Gathering Foundations. And to be fair, though, I need to crunch the numbers again too, because a lot of distributors have readjust. Like this, play boosters are a little bit cheaper than normal play boosters, but collectors weren't. So that's what I'm basing this off collector too, because collector is pretty good. It is the margins are literally 33%. So basically, a collector booster box costs your store about $200 is what it costs a store to buy a collector display. And so at $25, I believe that brings it at $300. Is
I'm looking it
how
up
much you
on
make.
I'm looking up on Target because I realize Walmart has gone the way of Amazon, and Walmart had it listed for $42, but that's because there's a bunch of third-party sellers.
Yeah.
But I'm going on Target's website and it says that they have the bundles pre-ordering at $52.99.
Yes, a little bit above that, which still puts it below that 42%.
Yeah, so
I don't know, but I mean, this is a good thing though. This is always like getting rid of the MSRP was the biggest slap in the face, and then of course they wanted to do that because they knew that people were going to cry bloody murder when our stores would cry bloody murder when they started doing the Amazon dumps. And what I couldn't stand the most about Amazon dumps is Amazon would use like this 10% off, like you're saving 10% by buying this, and actually you're saving like 60%. Like it was like I remember like New Capenna collectors just like said they'd have $139.99 and then scratched out and it'd be like, no, $100, you're saving $40. I'm like, No, you're not. You're saving like $160 of what you should be paying for. I mean, this is how terrible these products have fallen.
Yeah.
And so it was just Wizards was. I mean, they got rid of MSRP to make sure that they could just crash these prices whenever they felt like they needed to liquidate something. And
Well, do you think they did it because they anticipated that they were going to have liquidation problems with
my
like too
theory
much stuff printed, or
about 2015 and 2016, even 2014, the secondary market was making more than Wizards of the Coast was.
Mhm.
So with the price increases of everything, that with a lot of the products, like, I
that
mean,
was when
arguably
packs
it's,
changed from $3 to $4.
but it was like the secondary market was making a killing because things were
Yeah.
selling for really high, and then like singles were selling for quite a bit. And I think that Wizards of the Coast just became extremely jealous of like how much money was out there, that they felt like that they could capture instead of the secondary market. But I mean, companies just have to accept that. I mean, a tire company knows they're going to have to sell through, Les Schwab or these tire places. Like these places are going to have to take a cut. You can't just go direct to consumer with these type of things. I mean, they and if they could, but then I mean, Wizard of the Coast has never really accepted that it's a lot easier to make all of these stores do the selling part, and you just focus on creating a product. I mean, that's how like most products eventually figure this out. That it's like,
Mhm.
okay, let all these other people fight for the markups after what. So the only thing they should be focused on is making a decent profit margin from how much it costs to manufacture the good, and all the design and everything, and figure out what margins, reasonable industry margins there, and then let the secondary market do its thing. And Wizards of the Coast, though, somewhere along that line, they got like super jealous of the profits that we made in the secondary market. It's like, okay, we're going to take out MSRP, and we're gonna really compete on this direct to consumer level. And it was a lot of this hubris. I think Wizards just believed that they were,
They also pushed
you know,
Secret Lair at the same time.
yeah, they were too big. They didn't need their strategic partners. But I've always argued this till I'm blue in the face that Magic needs to be represented at the game store level.
Mhm.
Um,
That's where it
it's not
started.
Pokemon. And I still think like Pokemon still really tries. I mean, Pokemon has its own issues I could rant about, but they do a lot more to keep the ability for stores to make profit on their um, products than like Wizards of the Coast does. And in my opinion, Pokemon does not need stores. I mean, yes and no, because a lot of people do go to game stores to purchase Pokemon, but Pokemon's a totally different crowd.
Pokemon's for collectors, not
Yeah.
necessarily players.
Whereas now we're really starting to see the Magic the Gathering as a utility-based game. That
Yeah.
is the value of it, and why people purchase Magic the Gathering is to play. And so having a functioning store where people can go in and play is critical. And I mean, I'll talk to kitchen players like crazy. I've never stepped foot in a store and blah blah. Yeah, but so much of what the game has become is because of all of the cultivation that happened at the local game
Yeah.
store level.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, this in all, this is a really, really good thing. Like, I'm a little bit peeved that the 33%. That's kind of a little bit of a slap in the face. Like, oh, you only expect me to make 33% when everyone else in this industry is like 42%. That is the gold standard for like where MSRP should be compared to distributor price. And Wizards like,
Right.
nah, you guys don't need 42%. Type of thing. But I mean, I'll take this any day because we haven't been able to make 33% on things. I mean, of course, locally we can with people coming in and buying things from our store. But if you want to compete in the online market, I mean, you're down to
Good luck.
super slim margins.
Yeah.
Like, we're 3%, 5%. It's. I
You
mean,
need to sell
TCG Player
hundreds
and
of
Amazon.
units, thousands
Yeah,
of units to make money.
TCG Player and Amazon have trained people to expect. Like, people for the longest time thought booster boxes, like draft boosters, were $90,
Mm.
and the wholesale distributor price of draft boosters for a long time was like 82, and or like even more recently it was 87. Then it went all the way up to 97 for Kamigawa Forward. So
Hmm.
when TCG Player was selling all day long for like 95 for those ones that were 87, and then after fees, like, man, people are lucky to get a buck off of
Yeah.
per box, and a lot of times they were using these things as like loss leaders of just trying to
Say at that point, what's worth the labor to go
yeah.
into that? It's just,
Well, I
what
mean,
the hell are we
you
doing?
can go to my channel. I will scream and scream and scream about what I call the soulless basement seller, because I don't get why they're doing it. I mean, I don't understand why they are, this whole race to the bottom, like the amount of labor they put in to make a buck is
You're almost
just
better off cracking for singles than just trying to recoup the costs off of
yeah,
singles.
yeah. And in Magic the Gathering it happens all the time too, where uh that is a lot more viable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's kind of cool about Magic. It's a um whenever like the sealed product gets rejected so much, then the secondary, like the singles, will shoot up. Like look at Murders of Carlo
Yeah.
Manor is a good example right now, where it's got like positive, what we call positive EV, because no one
Because of all the
wanted to buy the
surveil
sealed
lands and
product. Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
and now the surveil lands have pushed it above, and so now people can actually just break down the boxes. But then when they start breaking down the boxes, then it reduces the cost of the cards,
Yeah.
but it also increases the cost of the sealed product because there's less of it out there. So it's got kind of its own little,
Wild balancing act.
yeah. And so yeah,
Well,
so all in all, this is a good thing. What I'd actually like Wizards to do instead of their dumb secret layers is do exactly what Pokemon does. I wish they would sell on their own site. I wish they'd put bundles and starter collections and everything on their own site that you could go and purchase, because
yeah.
it gives us a reference point. So again, one of our problems is here locally and other stores too, is people come in and say, "You can get this on Amazon for this amount," and then you turn into this whole okay, or they
Like,
feel like you're
okay,
ripping
go.
them off.
Uh,
And then people have been just so, like I said, TCU Player and eBay have trained people so much to think that like greedy capitalism, that 42% is just a killing. And then, I mean, coming from a store owner, people just don't understand the cost of overhead and
yeah.
payroll, and it is massive. And so when you start going below that 40%, like when you have a finite amount of money you can make off of people, like every percentage point at that point matters, because I've told this story a million
That's
times
what
how
makes or breaks you.
we had a customer come in, and this is a long time ago, and he wanted to buy usually about $5,000 worth of product on every set release, so cases and cases of stuff.
Wow.
But he would tell us like, well, I can get it right now from this Sports and More, or these pre-sellers on eBay for this, but I want to support you locally, so I'll pay you this. And it was like we'd make like $50 or $150, or maybe even like $500. I can't remember how much we'd make, but it's definitely below 10%.
Yeah.
And then the guy was like, he kind of just like acted like, oh man, I'm just your best customer. I spent $5,000 here,
God.
man. I'm just like,
Fucking.
and then I'm like, I mean, yeah, but I made $300. Cool. I made $300 off of you, but I didn't see that $5,000. That the $5,000 went to the distributor. I mean, I made this little slim thing, but I mean, all he could see was the amount of money he spent at my store. And then in the same breath, we'd have these Commander players in, and I mean, this is my favorite type of customer, and I don't want to insult them because, man, I love them so much, but it's usually the people that they don't value their own time. So I mean, they're just too lazy to sort through their own cards, or too late, and they in the rush of opening packs, and so the customer that comes in and buys like a pack, and then trades in a card and buys cards, and these type of people, I'm like making all these margins off like these markups every transaction they're doing, and they only spend like $200, but I'm making $100 off of them. Like I'm making these, so they only spent. So in this scenario where I let's just say I made, probably 250 is probably out of 5,000. So the guy that spent the $500, I made the exact amount of money off of that customer, with 10% or 90% less money, circulating. And the worst thing about it too is it starts to spread like wildfire too. If you give one person a deal, everyone expects a deal. And so if that guy, you gave him a box, like at that point, I was making like a couple bucks per box or whatever it came out to with his big $5,000 order. Then everyone else expects, okay, well, he got it for basically $100 a box. Why can't I get it for $100 a box? And it just, at that point, it just spirals out of control. I mean, we've had some problems locally here too. Is I run my Patreon, so one of the things with my Patreon is I just allow people to order
Mm,
product and then I ship it to them at distributor cost. So my margins is the subscription fee. And I'll have these locals that will sign up. They'll sign up for my Patreon and they'll come in my store and be like, okay, I want this and this and this that you have listed for this amount. I'm like, okay, give me the money. It'll be here in about a week and a half. And they'll get super mad and be like, no, you have it on your store. You have it on your shelf right here. And they can't get the
that's for
concept. It's like,
the random mom pod guys
well,
coming in.
I've already paid for it. I've
Yeah,
already taken the
exactly.
risk on that. And it's like if
Hmm.
I sell it to you, then what happens when the person comes in and I don't have this now on my shelf that I can't make a product on? And that's
Yep.
like people can't understand the concept. It's like it's totally different. If you are giving me money up front, there's no risk. I know that it's already sold, and at that point I'm fine. I'm fine doing that all day long. And same thing, I try to discourage locals from signing up because it's like we have a finite amount of money that can be extracted out of this area, and we have to fight. We have to claw and dig for that money just to keep our
Yeah.
overhead with stuff. And so my whole view of online though is it's infinite. So basically I can be as cutthroat and competitive as I want with that
Yeah,
because
with
that's
Magic in particular, it's kind of wild because this is kind of going back to something that I messaged you a few weeks about. Was I have this game store near where I live, and it's not a conventional game store. It's just retail front, no play tables or
Mhm.
anything. But if you go and look and see what they have available, it's mostly slabbed cards, sports cards, and Pokemon. And then they have a little corner dedicated to Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! So you can clearly tell what makes the money. And you can really tell if you actually buy this stuff because this guy, whenever I went there and buy stuff, he seems almost elated to actually sell it. Like he sold me 2 Assassin's Creed boxes at $80 each, and I don't know what the going rate is for cost versus how much you can make money off of it. But it when I compared it online to the prices that I saw online, it was like people are selling it for like $90, $95. I was like, fine, sure, whatever. I'll buy a couple boxes. But from judging by his reaction and what he was saying to me, and he almost seemed excited to find someone willing to buy this magic stuff, is that it seems like it's very difficult to actually make money off of sealed product like that, especially if he's willing to sell it to me, some random guy who hasn't built a rapport with the store for a somewhat discounted price. It's really got me thinking, you know, with the reintegration of MSRP, is that, I think this, like what you were saying earlier, is going to be really beneficial for the game in the long run.
yeah, it
Not
was
just
first.
for the players, but particularly for the stores, so that way they can actually make a profit off of the
Yeah,
cards
well,
that come in.
we had to reference TCG at that point. It's like
Hmm.
if when people like online equaled eBay TCG player. So with Pokemon though, we can always like reference like no, it's going right now for 106 Pokemon selling for $160.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a good thing in the long run. Again, it's a slight. I mean, this is better than nothing. I'm still upset about the 33% versus 42%, but um,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to give credit where credit's due, like, and I'll complain about Magic. Like, that's one of when you love something, I think it's a good, healthy complaining about it. Good to keep it on track. Um, I'm pretty split with Universes Beyond. I don't like I'm with a lot of people. I don't like it shoved down my throat that I have to play it in standard. It used to be like I used to think of Universe Beyond as skins. So it's like
Yeah,
uh
it's like Fortnite.
yeah. And now when they're going to be unique cards that are going to be played in competitive formats, but then I have to like calm myself down and be like, you know what, Magic is the mechanics. So I'm gonna enjoy it regardless of its if it's
I seen you
uh
going back and forth pretty hardcore on Universes Beyond because you made that one video that I commented on, and I was like, yes,
mhm.
it's about the mechanics. It's not about whether or not SpongeBob is on the card. But then you seem to do a pretty quick 180 on that. On at least from
Well,
what I can
that
recall of
video
the
was
video, it
was
was
more of response video of all these other people that have like where were you? Where were you people? Where were you Sam? Where were you Brian when we were warning about this crap leaking in?
God, that same
And
article pissed me off.
oh yeah,
Man.
that was the one that because that guy was a I consider him a close friend for as far as creators are concerned. He's one of the first creators I butted up to,
Mm-hmm.
and and they, when we were having issues with the way that Magic was going, they called us like they used to throw that around that like Magic is you need to be more, you know, that's what I can't stand about the comments too is when I say inclusive, I'm not talking about a minority race political thing. I'm talking about the cutesy
Players.
crap,
Yeah.
the like trying to appeal to all these non-gamers. So they're like, oh, let's throw this into Magic so that they can have some reference point to
We want
uh,
our girlfriends to play
identify with the
too,
game.
man.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Well, not just that, but like, well, I want the bros to play. I want the like, and then the dumbification oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
of what I or following little trends. Like it was eking in. The Justice League was like the biggest one. They were trying to like. And that's not what Magic was. Magic was gritty. It wasn't a Marvel movie. It was a gritty fantasy,
And then
and
they
they were
got
trying to make
mad
it
when we called
so
it the Justice League.
yeah, and it's so black and white, good versus evil, and it's like boring. This is never how it was. It was, and and so, but then when we complain, then it would be, we'd be labeled as some sort of ist or unwelcoming or
Yeah.
gatekeeping. And now it's these same guys that are like talking about the purity
Pushing
of
back.
Magic and how they don't want to be playing
Yeah.
with SpongeBob. Well, dude, I didn't want to be playing with the Justice League. So you reap what you sow. And when you like that's it. Like, not only do you not push back, but you push people like me out, or people that did have kind of grievances with it. And so
Well,
my whole
that
thing
and
is
they were
like an
so
idealism.
sardonic with it for so long. Like they were almost not necessarily ambivalent, but like kind of just like middle of the road. It's just like, whatever. And it's like, where was the tipping point? Because I don't know about you, but the Fortnite cards came out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And Triumph of the Hordes was directly a Fortnite card, and that's like one of the saltiest commander cards ever slapped on, you know, what is now essentially the Fortnitification of Magic is, there it is. It's right there. It's like the penultimate version.
Well, and again,
And
I'd
now
still
and
make
now
the
people have a
argument.
problem with it.
The Fortnitification was happening clear back with the Justice League. That's
Yeah.
the, they just hadn't completely uh, unveiled it. Like it lost its identity clear back then. And like I mentioned earlier too, is this whole mainstreaming of like trying to appeal to everyone. That when the cosplay crap started taking off, when the conventions were more about cosplaying than playing the damn game. These conventions went from Grand Prix where everyone used to play the game to they try to make this like the sideshow was the
I
and
think one
so
of
that and
my
then but then you
favorite
had the
magic I think one of my favorite magic images is related to cosplay. This was like in Amonkhet or the second Amonkhet set, Hour of Devastation. There's this very attractive lady in her cosplay outfit, and she was like doing a pose, but it was in the middle of an LGS right in front of players that are very obviously they don't want their picture taken and they just want to play the game.
yeah.
And so Wizards, this was at that same time where Wizards was just pushing really hard to get into that side of the culture. And that's why it's one of my favorite images because it perfectly encapsulates kind of the problem is the focus on the wrong thing because it's like, yes, obviously it's cool that this person is cosplaying, but people are here to play the game, man.
Well, that was the issue I was having to like going back to the Tulare Community College type people that really were lusting after Magic becoming this big mainstream. They didn't have to be embarrassed to tell your friends you played it type thing, and
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, and I mean this is what happens. Like that's why I put community in quotations on these videos too. Is these people wanted to be a community? I'm like this is the game, people.
Yeah.
The only community is everyone that wants to play this game, but they
It's
wanted
in the
like make a
name of the game.
culture around Magic the Gathering where it was
Yeah.
like this, and then people became so cringe too because it's like one of my biggest pet peeves is when hobbies become people's identities, and so
Yeah.
uh, it's yeah, I mean this is, but when we tried to complain about that in 2017 and 2018, where were they? So like ideally coming from my perspective, I'd love if Magic could remain more pure. And like I said, the ideal world would be separate universes beyond from standard, or at least have like some sort of like, and this is the problem I have with Foundations. I would still like to see this progressive storyline where we're immersed in these storyline with a competitive, um, yeah, something like a standard or a limited type environment that just showcased the plane, the storyline, everything all in like one cohesive linear. But now we're all over the place with stuff. But then I have to go back to the drawing boards. Like the thing that makes Magic is mechanics, and
Yeah,
they can do some
I
fun stuff with
mean,
Universes Beyond. And again, I don't really care about SpongeBob. Like people are. Why is it SpongeBob that's setting people off? I mean, there's nothing worse than
yeah.
Doctor Who. They
No,
already,
I don't
for me,
think
they already crossed
anyone
those.
really enjoyed. Well, okay, obviously there were people that enjoyed the Doctor Who set, but out of all the universes beyond, I think I've seen the least reaction out of that Doctor Who one. It just felt very much a kind of, really? We're pulling from fantasy, and yet this is the property that we want to go with?
Yeah,
Okay. I
well,
wish
again,
we
it's
got
like
more Warhammer, but
it encompasses
yeah.
these. I've always had this big disconnect. I've always said I'm the worst person to own a game store because I just have a huge distaste for a lot of nerd culture, like Firefly. Like remember that show that everyone just nerded out for? I'm like, this is just stupid. Or the Avenger movies. Or so I just realized I'm not a good nerd or a good
Hmm.
geek, whatever the difference is. Like I'm a gamer, and so I love.
You're a
Uh,
nerd, you're just not a consumer
yeah,
with
yeah,
the,
and
the
I don't get in the
OOM.
culture, the whole
Yeah.
cultural thing in it, and like Doctor Who just seems like the biggest. Okay, we're gonna culturize this whole nerddom, uh, thing, and then like, man, and people like spazzing out about Lord of the Rings when it I'm like, Jesus, just are there any cool cards in it? Like, I'm focused more on is this gonna be a cool, fun thing? And people are like, no, but it's Lord of the Rings. Like, who
Hmm.
cares? Go read a Lord of the Rings book then. I mean, there already
Yeah.
is a Lord of the Rings convention or a culture or group or whatever. Like, why does it need to, like, all these people that like again want to like to mix these things together? It's like, well, I like Magic and Lord of the Rings, so it'd be so awesome if it was Lord of the Rings. Okay.
I I might be of that camp. I am a universes beyond enjoyer and what would it say? Not defender, but forgiver. I do own a Godzilla dinosaurs deck that very prominently features the Jurassic Park dinosaurs. But so honestly, well, at least when it comes with universes beyond, I am the most unbothered type of audience member. That I'm just like, cool, whatever. I was gonna buy the cards anyways. I want my Sephiroth and my Cloud cards, and now that they're gonna be in standard, sweet. Then I get to pair them with my Bloomburrow and Duskmorn cards that I open from my box or whatever. But
Yeah, I mean,
with the
speaking of like Duskmorn and Outlaws of Thunder Junction and things like that, like I don't think that anyone has any legs to stand on now that they want Magic to stay canonically correct or
well, that's kind of the other problem is that Magic has had this identity issue for I would say the last time Magic has had a cohesive identity in what it was trying to deliver in terms of world building stopped when the Weatherlight cycle ended.
well, I
Because
mean,
that
there's still
was
the
when,
argument of Arabian's Nights was the first Universes Beyond.
yeah, because it had Aladdin and
Hmm.
a whole bunch of other
And
random
and what's
kind of
Kaldheim? Kaldheim is just taken Viking. Like
just
it
Viking,
actually it was pretty
Norse.
funny with a while there. It seemed like Magic was always like a year late, whatever the big trend was. So, the
Hmm.
Vikings was a very popular uh, TV show,
Yeah.
and
I mean, Magic's first foray into top down kind of theme park design is what I like to call it was Kamigawa, and so
mhm.
that was very obviously more top down on Asian cultures, particularly Japanese. And then afterwards, you had Ravnica, which was not necessarily top down, but it took a lot of influences from architecture from European cities, and they just kind of rolled with that. And they've just been kind of doing that. Now, there are some worlds that are kind of like almost wholly original that Magic has made, like Alara. There's a lot of aspects of Alara that are like self-contained and original, but you can like look at Cons of Tarkir. That whole block is just homages to different sections of Asia, like you have the
Yeah.
Mongols and uh,
Yep.
Tibetan monks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, now recently, like what we've had for the last decade or so is, yeah, we'll have the Norse theme set, or we'll have Return to Ravnica for the 80th time, or we'll have the Harry Potter theme set,
Yeah,
which,
I mean, I would rather had Harry Potter than Strixhaven.
yeah, I'd much rather have Harry Potter than Strixhaven, because when I look at Strixhaven, I'm just like, I kind of wish this was just Harry Potter instead.
Yeah.
But they probably, I wouldn't be surprised if that was supposed to be the first Universes Beyond, but then the whole J.K. Rowling thing happened, and
They got,
knowing their
yep.
audience and everyone that works up in there, they would not touch that property with a 10-foot pole because of J.K. Rowling. But the sets themselves and the world building just hasn't had any cohesive identity for so
Yeah.
long that, whatever lack of identity that Universes Beyond brings to the table is akin to everything else that we've experienced. I don't see a difference between having a Final Fantasy set from a world building perspective as opposed to a Wild West themed
Yeah,
expansion.
yeah. Yeah, it's not at this point. Yeah. I mean, it's way water under the bridge at this point, and there's no going back to trying to rectify or, like I said, trying to make anything canonically correct or
Unless they try and do a reboot,
yeah.
which I don't.
Well, they killed their. I mean, I wouldn't even say they killed their IP completely.
Mhm.
But I mean, again, we've made that argument that Magic always was about kind of blending things. So Universe Beyond's a good fit. Like, and I've made the argument that it was necessary. Like, look at Lorcana, look at Star Wars Unlimited that's coming
Yeah.
out. All these things are based. They are Magic. Have you played Star Wars Unlimited or Lorcana?
I have actually, yes, I have played Lorcana. I was hoping I could show this. It's my one hit off of Lorcana that I've gotten. It's oh, there we go. It's foil Robin Hood. Um, $200 at least the last time I looked at it. But yeah, I've gotten into it a little bit and have played it, and I've really actually enjoyed it. It is a bit kind of dumbed down and simple.
Well,
Obviously, it's supposed to for kids, kind of get them ramped into this style of playing a game. But the whole idea of that we've experienced with card games for the last decade or so is, yeah, like Lorcana, Weiss Schwartz, am I thinking of correctly? Where it's the one where it's
mhm.
just they take a bunch of different random anime properties and just port that into the game.
And
And then you
there's
have
one
like
called
One
Universes
Piece.
that does that as well.
Yeah. Like this is not a new thing. And for Magic players, this is one of my kind of biggest issues that I have with Magic players in general is that they have they don't like to admit to it, but they have an elitism towards Magic because we were the first, we're the best, we're the most mechanically rich card game because we were the first. That's a lot of it kind of feels like is we were first kind of arguments, but and this is coming from someone who started card games in Yu-Gi-Oh and then worked their way into Magic. It's still very much that, and while a lot of players aren't as gatekeepy as they used to be, it still lives on in reactions to stuff like Universes Beyond, where it feels like a perversion of their game. And it was
Mhm.
never their game in the first place. I mean, to a certain extent, the game is owned of to the players, but Wizards makes the cards and you buy the cards. So if it really is that big of a problem, just don't buy the cards. Mark Rosewater
Well,
said it like 5 or 6 years ago. Just don't buy what you don't want to buy. It's that simple.
I hope they can navigate it correctly. Like I said, I wish there was a world where we could have our cake and eat it too here with like, okay, Universe Beyond could be its own. And that some of the other videos too, I've my fear is that Wizards just pushes these things too quickly and
They
they
do have a habit of doing that.
yeah, and then they quit focusing on what they should be focusing on. And but if they can surprise me and do these well, and they've done some of these Universes Beyond well. I mean, Lord of the Rings, they did it pretty good. And so how can you argue with that reception?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just yeah. But back to the Lorcana thing though. What I was referencing Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited specifically is they are back in the day when people tried to come up with a card game, they made sure that it was different enough for Magic to Like they didn't want to like, okay, they wanted to like put them, oh, we're gonna find a better way to play card games. I think Stars Unlimited and Lorcana are like a concession that Magic's figured out the best way to do a card game. And so
Mm,
instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, they've just taken the best things of mechanics of Magic and slightly changed it. And I think
yeah,
that like
that's kind
like
of what you
if
have
I
to
was
do.
Magic, I would have done the exact same thing. I would have moved on every IP that could create their own, Warhammer. They could create a TCG in 2 seconds. Let's hurry and
Yeah,
grab it. Let's hurry. Like this Marvel thing
yeah.
now, it's gonna be so hard for Lorcana to integrate Marvel, even though Disney and Marvel are owned by the same parent company. Um, it's gonna be hard for them now to just make Marvel cards actually become something that people want in Lorcana because now they already exist in Magic. If Magic would have had Disney cards, Lorcana probably could have never been created. And so there's one
Could
less
you
competitor
imagine?
that's
Could you imagine Mickey Mouse themed Black
well,
Lotus?
and as
That'd
I
be
stated in my
awesome.
other video, we were all creating Magic cards of our favorite IPs.
Yep.
I still have notebooks full of Final Fantasy VII characters as Magic cards. If I go back and dig through some of my old possessions of board in high school or board at church, where I was making Sephiroth a black white
I
uh
I remember. Yeah, I remember
geez.
fucking. I remember seeing Darth Vader and Goku, and when the elections happened 8 years ago, people were making Donald
Yeah,
Trump cards.
yeah.
Like this has always been a thing.
Yeah, it's
People
fun. And
like
it's
doing this.
like that's the best ode to Magic is by bringing other things and be like, let's make a Magic card of it. So
Hmm.
Wizards should lean into it. Again, ideally, I wish there would be a way to separate standard. Like I see that argument completely. I have a lot of nostalgia from following the storyline into these different blocks with cards that come out with we're playing these specific cards that represent this specific storyline. And but I mean, in all honesty, it's been such a mess in the past. Like, does anyone even know what's going on right now? Like, I lost so track of like what happened in Bloomburrow. Some people got transformed into what for what and what. Like
Yeah.
the whole Oko storyline with Thornhill Drain is like what. And then somehow they're like trying to tie back in, and they're moving so quick too. They had to hit all these planes for. So first, a War of the Spark like had to include like 1 billion planes. We had to hurry and represent every plane because the whole storyline of War of the Spark, Nicol Bolas is going to take over every one of the planes. And then and it was just an excuse to like go back to all these and milk all these different mechanics and planes and stuff. And then as soon as they got done with that, we didn't even have time to breathe until they started setting up this whole Phyrexian takeover where it's also going to take over every plane possible. So we have to hurry and go to every plane possible and piece together of why this Jace needed to go and get this particular thing to get this particular.
All within a year
And
and a
it's like,
half.
Jesus.
Like,
So no one could even keep up with it anyway.
yeah.
And so I don't know if there's any legs to stand on. Like I said, and people are like, "Oh, well, it's just sucks that Magic's dead now because now we're going to be playing New York with Spider-Man, and then SpongeBob's going to make an appearance."
You're
And
right.
and it's
Yep,
like,
right. Spider-Man didn't kill Magic. It
yeah.
was never the it
Well,
was never the third party issues that ever killed Magic.
still though, there is a warning because I do, and I made this comparison in my last video with WizKids made a game called Dice Masters. They also did
Mm, I saw that video.
the figure one too,
Hmm.
and again, I still think it wasn't the idea; it was the execution, and
Saturation and just too
yeah, and
much.
they didn't care. They didn't like, okay, let's move on. Instead of like really building these, letting people enjoy these sets and figure things out. It's like, nope, on to the next IP. Let's try and get this in. And it's just this big rush to get these. And that's so Wizikos, I hope they can navigate that and be like, okay, let's let's give time for these like Lorwyn coming out that
Hmm.
people can actually follow it and enjoy it and then I think the Universes Beyond will be a lot more stomachable.
Honestly,
But
I think it would be better if like we got Magic World Universes Beyond World because then it gives that Magic World time to actually breathe because we're going back to Tarkir next year and we had 3 sets worth to explore Tarkir and now we're going to a post March of the Machine Tarkir so we get to see how the Omen paths affected Tarkir and everything like that. And then originally what it was supposed to be was we were supposed to go to Lorwyn right after that. So it's that contrast of being able to appreciate the two different worlds, but it being back to back is kind of that theme park kind of issue that we've had for so long. Whereas, at least here with Universes Beyond, dare I say, it feels like a palate cleanser almost, where it's just like magic stuff, and then you get your gimmicky Sephiroth cards, and then you go back to your magic world, and then wash it down with Spider-Man and Venom, that kind of stuff.
And it makes sense too why they want as we said earlier in the video, where I'm sure they're sick of designing commander cards. So
they've probably ran out of space with commander design, because it seems like a lot of the commander design that they have been doing has just kind of been trace work lately. Like a lot of the same converted mana costs with the same type of effects, secondary, tertiary effects stapled on top of each other. And the card that made me most aware of this issue was Trouble in Pairs. That's where I was just like, I've seen this card like 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah,
I mean, this
it's not
is
singleton
the best version,
anymore.
but yeah, exactly. It's just
we get another blood artist in this Foundations. Yeah. So now you have how many blood artifacts in a commander? So yeah, I don't know. Ideally, that's what I'd like them to do, is come out with another format. I know we have too many formats to begin with, but it's I'd like to see one where it's Magic, where you play Magic, and then another one where you have it's another rotating of what's like the latest cards that have come out, so you can play with your Spider-Man and yeah. But who knows? Like the one thing that Magic is consistent about is being inconsistent. So
yeah,
and
that's true.
They always, I love when they make these statements. It's like these matter of facts, like this is how it's going to be forever now, and then they like how many times have they changed? I mean, no, look at MSRP. That's a big policy change back to.
I mean, we got from the vaults every year until they stopped making money. So, yeah. I mean, we got event decks for however long until they stopped making money.
Yep. Oh yeah, and these are going to challenger decks, and these are going to be evergreen products. Don't even last 2 years. So that's the whole thing with and I would even say this, ideally, this is how a company should be. There's nothing worse than a company that doesn't innovate and doesn't change and doesn't realize that, things are, and thank God Wizards has, like credit where credit's due. I think Wizards of the Coast, compared to 2022 and 2023, is night and day. Like they are actively trying to support stores again. They're actively trying to get regionals, nationals, that type of like competitive play has been completely revived. That's why I always see these comments about how standard and Magic is dead, and like arena numbers are up, standard play at stores are up. Like we're still struggling here because small town, and then the problem with small towns is they get super clicky. So only certain things can fire. So now everyone only plays Commander. And then it's like I was bitching the other day because we got some people to show up for Standard, and then some Commander players came in. Oh, just play Commander with us, and they leached our Standard players. And so like, oh well, we had 5 people showing up for Standard, so we just needed like 3 more to show up. And then it's like, okay, well,
psych,
now we're down to none again because they got them playing Commander.
The damn Commander amoeba blob just sucked up everything else.
But I mean, that's not just my anecdote is not what's reality. And reality is Worlds had way it felt like Magic in this last Worlds felt like Magic in 2018, with like the amount of articles, the amount of eyes, the amount of like tournament reports, the way the market responded to cards. Like I hadn't seen that in a long time. And so obviously Wizards of the Coast is doing things right. And I mean, all these, this entire different shift back in the mood of the Cynthia Williams days of they want to talk about a Wizards of the Coast that just wanted to milk people. That was that era.
The overprinting era.
Oh yeah.
It was gross. One of the best effects that I've seen of Universes Beyond that I haven't seen a whole lot of content creators or anyone really talk about is I was just at a gaming store a couple months ago, and this is the first time I'd ever been to the store, so I had no frame of reference for who goes to this place regularly. But when I went there and played, I played with kids, like 17, 18-year-old kids, and they were playing with Fallout decks. they said, hey, we got into the game because of this, because of Fallout, and it provided this avenue. And it's not necessarily the accessibility that I'm in favor of, but it's the fact that it's young people. Because that's one of the issues that we've had with Magic for a while now, at least from what I've noticed, is that the average age of the players has aged kind of with us. I'm in my younger
Yep.
30s. I'm 34. I assume that the average age of the Magic player sits around 28 to 32 is kind of, if I had to take a guess. And as time goes on, if they don't do stuff like Universes Beyond, that average is only going to increase further.
Well, that was my issue with. So I was invited to go to a convention. It's called the Magic Summit. They actually had to cancel it this year because it was they didn't sell enough tickets or didn't think they're gonna, sell enough to make it worthwhile. And so I was invited to go up to this, and it was in Salt Lake, which is where I used to live and used to play. And I was looking around, it's like these are the same people I used to see at Grand Prix, and there was like no new blood. And it was
Yeah.
cool that there were still so many people that were, and it's the same thing here at the store too, is like a lot of our core people that still come in are the OGs when we opened up the store 10 years ago. And we haven't had a lot of new blood. And if we
Yeah.
do get new blood, it doesn't last like that. So whatever Magic did 10 years ago to create like a super strong fandom, they haven't been able to replicate that for the least last 5 years. And so, yeah, if they can do that by getting new blood in with, and you're right, like I had a lot of people start playing Magic because of actually Warhammer, like the Warhammer Universes Beyond decks, and so yeah, hopefully this Marvel thing can get people into playing Magic, and like that's the problem is I think that Magic is as it sells itself once people figure out how the mechanics are played, and oftentimes people are only introduced by what they like, and if they don't like fantasy, and especially during the Justice League days when it was cringy fantasy, like I don't blame people from not, if you didn't know Magic, why the hell would you ever want to get introduced to Magic during that time period? Like it was so niche too, like a specific type of fantasy, or like almost like an inside joke. Like you already got to know about Magic to want to do anything with Magic, and that's why I stagnated for so long.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. Universal Mod, if it's done correctly, that again is my big complaint. Is it's the way that 2022, 2023 with the we're just gonna milk and milk and milk and not care about, man, they didn't give two craps about organized play during that time period. And it's sad too, because I think some of the best design happened during that time period, and it was just the biggest slap in the face to everything that Chris Cox and Cynthia Williams.
The Lock, where I'm like, damn, I wish I played that like in the store in standard. Like a lot of the best design cards I think I've ever seen had come from that era.
And a lot could have been done with it too, like a lot of tournaments, a lot of like fanfare, a lot of things could, like a lot of conventions that were actually organized to celebrate the game and play the game, rather than like everything was so designed during that time period to milk and milk some more. And it was just, yeah. So I don't know. In all like fairness, as far as my mood is concerned towards Magic the Gathering, it's night and day from 2 years ago, I would say.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I wasn't a doomsayer, but it was right around Kamigawa and Warhammer is when it was like this renewed kind of interest in the game. And it's just like, okay, we actually have something now. Like a new reference point is what it feels like, almost a rebirth as of lately. Like 2022 just feels like it's a reinvigoration that I haven't felt since...
It feels like 2004. Yeah, like 2014 again. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's when
like right around that era.
And hopefully it can just keep it going. And that's my worry though. I'm just so worried they're gonna get back in this trap of like, they see all that Universes Beyond money we can make, and we can turn into what I call clickbait buys. where it's just about so track these people in, get them hooked, and make a quality game. That's all I ask. They don't have
Well,
a
I
problem with
mean,
Universe Beyond.
Chris Cox did move on to being the Hasbro CEO now, right?
Yeah, yeah. And Cynthia Williams gone
So,
too. She's back to. I mean, she's in the perfect position, which is Funko, which is exactly what she tried. Like this is the perfect job for her because she treated Magic like Funko Pops. Like,
yeah, she really did. And kind of, this is kind of the last thing that I'll say about it. And this kind of goes along with the whole Fortniteification. And also, this is kind of a response to you that you made in one of your videos, is that Fortnite, in general, the game, has managed to maintain its popularity and has gotten more popular as the years have gone on. It's just not forefront mainstream popular. It's just very gamer popular. Not only because it's one of the best live service battle pass style games that's still on the market today, but because of the brand integration, because they put pop artists like Ariana Grande or The Weeknd, or the new season just came out and it's Snoop Dogg that's in the game now. And so like you can run around as Snoop Dogg and then you'll get killed by Doom Guy, and then you'll pan over to someone else and it's like Squidward doing the gritty or something, you know. It's just kind of wild. But one of the side effects of having something like that, and it's what I've noticed, and I hope it happens for Magic too, is that because Fortnite has integrated a lot of mainstream pop culture into the game, is that the player base is incredibly wide, and or not wide, the variety of the players is wide. There are a lot of women that play Fortnite, and it is somewhat popular among women, younger women in particular. And what I'm thinking is, or what I'm hoping, is that something kind of similar happens with Magic. Because if there's one thing that women like, is they like cute stuff. They like seeing something that, like, you know, fires off certain cylinders in their head. Don't get me wrong, I also like my cute stuff too. But we need a lot of that kind of thing, because it's not just having women in general, it's just having 50% of potential customers getting into something, breathing new life, and having, you know, a whole new set of players to play with. And hopefully they don't get too aggressive, but I really think that this is kind of a that's another thing that Magic players have been talking about for decades now. And you get your yearly "Where's the Women in Magic" article. I think this is a genuine way to get women into playing Magic, is honestly bring Hello Kitty. I want to see Hello Kitty Secret Layers in a Sanrio style set. Like, for those of you who are listening, like, I want Cinema Roll on a card. You know, like, I want I can't think of any others right now off the top of my head, but having opportunities to license out your, dare I say, perfect game system to very profitable properties kind of seems like mixing your chocolate and your peanut butter together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you can still, the problem is you don't want to be mixing, you know, chocolate with ketchup.
Yeah, true.
And that's kind of like it's again, going back to, I hope they can do Universes Beyond correctly, because I mean, would the best thing for Call of Duty be to become Fortnite?
Well,
So
I
I
mean,
think
Call of Duty
the
kind of
whole
did
reason
become
why,
Fortnite.
well, I know, I guess that's a bad example, but um, what made Fortnite kind of a moot argument here is it started as just that was the whole
Its
thing.
own
We're gonna
thing.
make a
Yeah.
we're gonna make a shooter that just encompasses every pop culture reference possible.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah, because
Magic didn't.
Fortnite started as a survival type game, like way back in 2014. I'm gonna nerd out here for a second, but Fortnite started out as like a defend yourself against waves of zombies. This was like at the
Mhm.
tail end of horde modes being popular in games, and then eventually shifted over to battle royale. And this is something that I see a lot of older Fortnite players now talking about, is they have a lot of the same arguments that Magic players now have, where they have specific identities tied to how Fortnite built itself as a brand over the course of a decade, versus now where a lot of their favorite characters are kind of thrown off to the wayside, and how the visual identity of the game has changed so much to the point where it's unrecognizable at the cost of having so many more players. So I just find that to be a very interesting parallel where it seems like both players from both games have the same arguments about the same thing, but just in different vessels, really.
Yeah. Yep. And I'd go back to my reference too with I think Magic kind of has to do this, because if not, it's going to get knocked off and someone else is going to create more Lorcanas and
Someone's going to do the IP suit.
yeah, because it works so well. That's the mechanics of Magic work so well with creating Spider-Mans and Sephiroths and yeah. So it's a fine line. Like, again, I wish I had a solution for it. I wish there was some way to keep
This might,
like I said, have it
as grim as it sounds, this might be the way to help keep the game alive for at least another decade. Because let's be honest here, the idea of a game keeping itself alive for longer than 5 years, one, is rare because it's very hard to do so and retain an audience, and two, it's a very novel thing that none of us have ever experienced. I mean, from this point, or, well, since its inception forward, Magic has been the longest surviving card game, followed by Pokemon and then Yu-Gi-Oh! But and you name any other card game that has ever come out from that period up until now, the chances of them making it to the 5-year mark are slim to none. And even if you can make it a decade, good luck. Now, for something like Magic to make it 30 years, that's kind of a miracle in of itself. Does it have the potential to go 40? Can it go 50? Maybe.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Universes Beyond is an avenue to give it that extra time to survive that period and maybe make it to 2030, 2040.
Also, I'd like to push back though that, like, I think the big boom in Magic that happened in 2014 didn't come at they didn't have to sacrifice. It became mainstream back then. Well, not really mainstream, but it exploded in popularity because people realized what a hidden gem it was, or what it was. And I think that the stagnation and the not being able to appeal, Battle for Zendikar era, that whole time is when Magic did the worst of both worlds, where they just, like I said, started becoming kind of cringy. And it's weird that, I think that has more to do with why the people that stuck with it. Like I said, I've seen the same faces at all these tournaments for years to come with no new blood, and it's because the people who are sticking with it were like holding on it because they were introduced at the glory years of Magic. So I don't know if Universes Beyond is necessarily the solution to get like I said, not all building a player base isn't necessarily a good thing if it comes at the cost of the quality of the game.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times those are short-lived, and you can see that in so many examples of things that have gone kind of viral in the gaming world. Like take Pokemon Go, for example, that was just they had that, what was that Niantic game that existed before Pokemon Go that
I know what you're talking about.
But it had a vibrant player base for years and years and years, and it was successful as far as successful. And then Pokemon Go took off, and then it's killed that original game. Apparently, Pokemon Go is still trugging, but it's nothing like it was.
Yeah.
It's nothing like it was, and that's like, I don't want to see Magic happen that too, where it gets this massive explosion and gets all these people that get into the game for kind of the wrong reason, that becomes just such a cultural, flavor of the week. So again, this is a really turning point. We can all agree on that. So this is like a crossroads for Magic, where it could definitely, I could see it go either way.
Yeah.
And that's concerning. Like, as coming from like a conservative standpoint of something that is like, I could see that Magic the Gathering, yeah, a lot of people are aging, but it still was adding, like, Magic actually was year to year, it plateaued, but it never started going down. And definitely the competitive player did. Definitely people that were going to Grand Prix and watching Twitch and stuff, that stuff was going down. And you can make the argument, well, okay, that's the first cracks, and then everything else is going to start falling through. But yeah, that's another kind of statistic that I like to bring up is Lord of the Rings. That's the most the 2022, 2023 era. That's the most Wizard of the Coast has ever made, and that's also simultaneously the same time that we have all this like disdain and lack of like the level of standard play or store play was dismal.
Yeah.
And so it's so
that weird dichotomy of
yeah, it can be very misleading.
Yeah.
With seeing. So again, it's really about like I'm thinking about some of my other hobbies too. Would I want to sacrifice what it is now to appeal to more people? And a lot of those hobbies I wouldn't want to. So that's kind of what I push back with that sometimes just appealing to more people isn't like necessarily the best thing.
Yeah. If Magic had an opportunity to just explode in a ball of flames and just die in one fell swoop, I think this would be the most interesting route for it to go, because then at least you get a lot of interesting IP slop, as people refer to it as, all in one go, and then it just kills the game and it's dead forever, right? No one wants that, especially you, because if Magic dies, your store is going to be hurt.
Well, here's the thing that I've come to. We'll have some like transitional pains for sure, but I've noticed that when one thing falls, something else picks up. So
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm pretty adjustable now
with.
Man, don't. I need to do a Pokemon rant, because talk about something that.
You could also get into sports cards, from what I've personally experienced.
How are those reviving?
Exploded in popularity.
I know.
Over the last
I don't
get
it. I don't get how. Crazy world.
What's funny is my dad. He's really into collecting sports memorabilia and sports cards, and I just want to communicate to him like, you're one step away. We could play Magic together, but you just won't. But whatever, I'll take it. I'll take the sports cards because at least they look cool. And I was looking at some of the sports cards and how they do handle their business model. I'm like, damn, I think Magic could learn a lot from like the trading card world, in particular with serializations. Like, I don't know if you play or if you collect sports cards at all, but the serialization for sports trading cards are pretty hardcore. Like, there's a lot of 1-ofs and a lot of like 5-ofs and whatever, but it's like very gimmicky and very appealing foiling styles that gets paired with that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, damn, why doesn't Magic or Pokemon do this? Like, that is rife.
Well, Pokemon's the weirdest one. In one of my videos, I need to make a video just comparing like, why is this Charizard collectible and this Charizard's not collectible? And one of the reasons is the rarity of it. But there's like, they've come out with a bunch of Charizard EX products. One of them is just
I bought this guy. I bought the Charizard statue that comes with the
the statue one. The better one is it's just a box, but it's got one of the coolest, like, it's almost like a stained glass Charizard. And then so I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at the one that everyone's collecting right now from 151, and I'm like,
that looking guy there.
This one's way more flashy. This, in my opinion, that's one of the coolest looking Charizards that's been printed. But since it comes in a box set, it's not collectible. It's because people are like obsessed with the rarity of things, and it's just like that's why I love Magic so much, is utility. Like, people, the vast majority of the reason why a Magic card is worth money is people actually want to play with it. And that's so I actually warn Wizards of the Coast from going down that route of the Battle for Zendikar route of putting these big lottery tickets into things, and because the problem with that is it causes this you have to keep one-upping yourself, and it's just not very. And talk about an industry that destroyed themselves with that was sports cards, because sports cards they died for a good decade, and then had to
the 90s they killed themselves.
Yeah. And that's because they kept ramping it up, and I'm going to one up this and one up that, and we're going to make this, and same thing. They went through this whole pricing. It's like, okay, we'll make $20 booster packs, but you're guaranteed to get this. And it's like, well, if you're guaranteed to get Yeah, it's just a big like I love this with Magic with collectors. Like collectors have um when they had a foil, everything being foiled, it put so much value into those original packs because people remembered the prices of foils. Well, if all the money is being put into collectors instead of draft boosters, then the foil versions actually become very common
Yeah.
because they're not. And so
And
now
the
collectors
quality of the foils
boosters,
are so low that it just adds to the problem. It's like I buy this
yeah, yeah,
$20 collector booster pack, and there's a good chance that 80% of those cards are gonna not be tournament
scratched and
legal.
curled. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, then so now with these collector boosters that people purchase now, then the foil slots don't add any value to it. So then
Yeah.
Wizard Coast has to be like, okay, we'll have to ramp it up with like putting, ultra chase cards like in Kamigawa. They had the neon cards and then the mana crypts in the boss caverns. And then it just becomes a really, really like yeah, you just have again keep having to one up things to where they used to have value in foils, now foils are nothing. So or I mean, but Magic is definitely they've dropped the ball on that. They made a lot of these specialty versions like showcases, and well, I mean, collectors boosters in general have just made things so common that they're not even like
I don't
they
understand why they can't
misjudge
just
how many
integrate the
people.
two products into each other. I don't know why we can't just buy normal play boosters and have an incredibly rare chance of getting those showcase style
Well, they
frames
did those in
or
set boosters. That's kind of
well
the big
yeah,
bait and switch. Is play boosters basically just as draft boosters now, and they just got rid of set boosters. But I mean, Wizard of the Coast, it makes sense
yeah.
from the it's kind of slimy from them to like I've showed this in videos before of the arena starter kits, or now these call them starter kits, and a collector bit booster display. And like it probably costs Wizard of the Coast the exact amount of money to print the collectors versus these starter kits. They sell the starter
Yeah.
kits for $10. They sell the collectors for 200. And it's like that's the biggest scam ever with and so they obviously they're trying to train everyone to really want to purchase collectors so they could sell more of the collectors. But even that they've scaled back on though, because collectors for a while were like so unlimited. They just print and print, print and print and print. They'd sell as many as possible. And now with these later sets, they especially Foundations was super low for
Yeah.
collectors boosters. And so yeah, they're figuring it out. Like Wizards is doing a better job of navigating that. Uh, but I like to see them too. Like some of these versions, make them collectible. Why are they? Why is it the exact same rarity to get a showcase foil or extended foil in the scope of things? There's many copies of extended. If you actually go on and look at particular cards, sometimes the cheapest version is the extended foil, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, if that's the
And it's
case,
also it's also exhausting seeing seven different versions of the same card. Like when I was
yeah,
going through the list of foundations to pick my favorite cards, it was getting annoying seeing the same card 5 or 6 times over, except it has extended art or it has a special border. Or maybe it has two of those at the same time, and it's like Jesus Christ.
yeah.
If you're gonna have different variations, at least make it worth it.
Well, and
Because at least in particular, I don't want the extended art borders because they feel kind of worthless to me. It's just like, dude, just get rid of the border entirely and give me a borderless card. Like this just feels kind of like a
and make them
wasted
a lot more rare,
opportunity.
so that
Yeah,
people actually do want them. The very specific people want, they have to actually search for them, and the rest of us, we won't even come in contact with them because we
yeah,
won't be searching for them, so we won't just randomly open them. And I mean, we might randomly open one, but at that point they'll be rare enough that it'll be a feel good thing because we can offload it for the version we do want, type thing. But
because I mean that's
yeah,
what
that's
Pokemon does, right? They have the playable version and then you have the super
yeah.
collectible version,
Well,
right?
in the Pokemon like actively kills their utility because whenever anything
Mm.
becomes even remotely playable, they print the crap out of it in some sort of battle box decks or
No,
which just makes me like, okay, whatever, Pokemon. But yeah, Magic though, the biggest pet peeve that I've had with Magic though is reprinting specialty versions.
yeah.
So like mysteries and the list slots where like when they reprinted the Grand Prix Lightning Bolt, why?
Why? Yeah.
I mean, you took a collectible card. Like that's I hope that they like if I were to redo Magic the Gathering, that's the main thing I do is once you print a version of a card in a specific border and a specific art, it never gets done in that form again. And that way they can retain the collectibility. So they can
Yeah,
reprint all they
exactly.
want. They can reprint Lightning Bolt again. Okay, use new art for it. But it's
Yeah.
like it was so dumb because I remember this with the Thoughtseas too. So everyone loved the Lorwyn Thoughtseas art. And so it was worth so much more than the Theros. So what they go and do in the next core set, then they just printed the Lorwyn art. And it's like,
Yeah,
why?
it was Iconic Masters, right? That they did that in or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, or what? Yeah, or one of those that they did. It's like, geez, it's like print a new version and allow these cards to remain collectible. And it's really starting to show now in some of these sets that aren't too old, like the Icorias and the Throne of Eldraine, is because not only is the card's been reprinted, but the exact same versions and arts have been reprinted, and so now there's literally no reason to buy like a Throne of Eldraine pack.
Yeah, heaven forbid we start getting reprints of cards that had exclusive, cool, like F&M art from 20 years ago, or
Well, they've already done that in like list slots. Yeah, they've already.
well, they have, yeah, but I'm but I'm saying like in the new frame or whatever, just kind of like killing a lot of like that random one-off kind of just
Yeah,
old value that just like, oh, here's this random counterspell that's really cool because it's a judge promo and it's the only version of this art, and then they'll just print it in a list, and it's like,
yeah, and that's the stupidest thing they could have done. So it's so hopefully, I mean, Wizards they can still change course from that too. Like,
I don't understand the purpose of the list anyways. Like it
yeah,
always just felt kind of
it
like
was the
worthless
stupidest
chaff just
decision.
padding out packs.
Well, not only that, but no one accounted for it too. So no one, when they
Yeah.
actually went to buy a booster pack, would actively like, oh, I could get a list card in it. So it was just such a waste across the board. They weren't getting
Why do
any
I have a Zendikar
reprint
common
equity.
in my
Yeah,
booster pack? What the fuck is going on here?
yep. It didn't add any wow factor that they thought it would add. Yeah, it was just a massive misstep by Wizards. They
Mm.
because Wizards have been so tone deaf. That's been my biggest problem with them, and they've been pretty tone deaf with even some of the stuff we've talked about today, with like Universes Beyond and I don't know. They just need a better way to flesh
We'll
these
have
things out
to,
before they do it.
yeah, we'll have to figure it out for them, and maybe we could do it in the next episode.
Yeah.
But I think at this point we can call it a day here. Kevin, thank you very much for joining me here. Would you like to plug anything before we go?
I think everyone knows where to find me. Gunner Games channel, Rogue Deck Builder forever, revive it. But hopefully we'll get back in the swing of things and creating some content.
Yes, yes. I for one enjoy seeing you make your content, and partially it's the reason why I reached out to you because I was like, oh hey, oh, it's a Renaissance era. Get the band back together in a
Yeah.
sense. But yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I was gonna plug my own stuff. So obviously here on the Tasty Snackies channel, if you made it this point in the podcast, thank you for listening. Please pay attention because I'm also drumming up some stuff and I'm very excited about. I'll give you a preview and I'll tell you, Kevin. I mean, you've already seen one of the games that I'm working on, but
Mm-hmm.
there's three in total that I've been working on a lot, and one of them is kind of the precursor to the game that I had already shown you, and it's actually really cool. And I'll talk to you about it after I stop recording on this podcast. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and thank you for listening. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that YouTube horseshit. My name is Nick, and this is Kevin. Thank you all for watching. Have a good night.